Chapter 2017. The reason Zhang Lai had come to the Evil Peak sword meet was because of Nie Tian. Originally, he had planned to kill Nie Tian with Song Lan and the other's strength. However, he had never expected Nie Tian's strength to be so strong that it had far exceeded his expectations. Nie Tian's battle prowess in the top 8 battles had made Zhang Lai even more determined to kill him. Now that he thought about it, Nie Tian was only an early overgod, and yet he was stronger than a late paramount god like Song Lan. After all, Celestial Wave wasn't an ordinary late paramount god. He was a very strong one, and was even strong enough to fight peak paramount gods. Nie Tian was only an early overgod, but had managed to defeat a late paramount god. That was a talent that couldn't even be described as heaven-defying. He was a monster that shouldn't even exist. Zhang Lai had a feeling that if he were given a few more years to become a paramount god, he would definitely be able to fight peak paramount gods with ease. There was no way he was going to let Nie Tian grow any stronger. At this moment, he was determined to kill Nie Tian in front of everyone, even if he had to be shameless to the very end. He had a premonition that if he didn't kill Nie Tian today, Nie Tian would become his worst nightmare in the future. Now that he was determined to kill him, Zhang Lai wasn't going to wait any longer. Even if it meant offending the Wind and Cloud Alliance, or even provoking them to retaliate, he wouldn't hesitate. Never could he have imagined that Gongsun Xingji would turn on him for the sake of Nie Tian. He was very curious to know what Nie Tian had that Gongsun Xingji would do such a thing. Zhang Lai, if you want to kill Nie Tian, you'll have to do it over my dead body. Gongsun Xingji was enraged as well. His huge body released a majestic sword will, making him look like a huge sword that stood between the heavens and the earth. Not to mention the fact that Nie Tian could save his life. Zhang Lai's actions alone were already intolerable to Gongsun Sheng. Whether or not Nie Tian was qualified to be the sword chief was a matter of the Shenwu Sword Pagoda. Yet, Zhang Lai jumped out and said what to do, which was a slap in Gongsun Shengji's face. Gongsun Sheng had always been wary of the forbidden blood seal in his body, which was why he had tolerated it time and time again. However, now that Zhang Lai had forced him to this step, he could no longer tolerate it. If you want to fight, then let's fight. At worst, I'll just die. Gongsun Shengji, you think too highly of yourself. Do you really think you can fight me just because you've reached the legendary realm of sword and martial arts as one? Cold chuckled Zhang Lai. Soon after, with a jerk of his body, rays of golden light immediately radiated from his body, instantly condensing into an armored giant that wrapped around his body. The Xing Tian armor. Seeing this, Nie Tian frowned and cried out in his heart. He had seen this on Jiang Yulan before. It was the Xing Tian armor of the Jiang family's Xing Tian bloodline. However, Zhang Lai's Xing Tian armor was many times more powerful than Jiang Yulan's. The golden armored giant was tens of thousands of meters tall, towering like a mountain in the sky, as if it was announcing to the world that he was the ruler of this world. Gongsun Sheng's eyes narrowed, and he could not help but feel embarrassed. He could feel the enormous aura of the Xing Tian armor. It was definitely not something he could compete with right now. Gongsun Sheng, I will defeat you in one move. At this moment, Zhang Lai's voice was heard. The Xing Tian armor smashed down. The giant golden fist was like a ball of golden fire, causing the air to tremble. Gongsun Sheng's expression changed slightly. He immediately attacked with his sword, and a sword shadow whizzed out. Boom! The moment the golden fist and the sword shadow collided, the sword shadow was unable to withstand a single blow. After a loud bang, it shattered. In the next moment, a blood-curdling scream could be heard. Gongsun Sheng was sent flying, and the air behind him was instantly dyed red with blood. Exalted God Sword Lord, Nie Tian couldn't help but cry out in alarm at this sudden turn of events. He had never imagined that Gongsun Sheng could not even take a single punch from Zhang Lai. Although Gongsun Sheng had the forbidden blood seal in him, his battle prowess far exceeded that of an ordinary peak paramount god. At the very least, he was stronger than Ghost Martial Wild Sand. Even so, he could not take a single punch from Zhang Lai. From this, one could see how strong Zhang Lai was. This, everyone gasped in astonishment. Gong Sun Sheng was known as the #1 swordsman in the Nine Realms, and yet he could not take a single punch from Jiang Lai. Gong Sun Sheng was currently floating in midair. Although he had not died on the spot, his injuries were severe, and he had completely lost the ability to fight. Jiang Lai laughed coldly, his face full of disdain. With such strength, do you think you deserve to be called the #1 swordsman in the Nine Realms? Then, Jiang Lai turned to look at Nie Tian and said in a cold voice, "Kid from the Nie clan, it's your turn." Nie Tian's expression darkened, and his expression became extremely ugly. If Gong Sun Sheng had been defeated by a single punch from Jiang Lai, how could he possibly be a match for him? Is League Lord Jiang really going to kill Nie Tian? The eyes of the crowd trembled, as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Jiang Lai's status was very high. After all, would he really attack Nie Tian in front of so many people? At this moment, Jiang Lai couldn't care less. He had already made up his mind to kill Nie Tian. Jiang Lai, if you want to kill Nie Tian, you'll have to kill me first. However, just at this moment, another voice rang out before a figure appeared. It was Guiwu Guangsha, Ghost Marshal Wildsand. When Jiang Lai saw the face of the person in front of him, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Then he smiled and said, "Looks like the kid from the Nie clan isn't simple. There are actually so many experts willing to die for him." Lord Ghost Marshal Wildsand. Seeing Ghost Marshal Wildsand's appearance, Nie Tian couldn't help but cry out in his heart. Ghost Marshal Wildsand's strength was below Gong Sun Sheng's, and it was simply impossible for him to be a match for Jiang Lai. Jiang Lai, no matter what, you're the leader of an alliance. I didn't expect you to be so despicable. How despicable? Ghost Marshal Wildsand sneered, and said with a provocative face, "You're courting death." Jiang Lai's eyes darkened, and his killing intent was revealed. Then, without any hesitation, the Heaven's Punishment armor smashed down once again, aiming for Ghost Marshal Wildsand's life. Ghost Marshal Wildsand only knew how terrifying Jiang Lai was when he felt the aura of this punch. Once this punch landed, Ghost Marshal Wildsand's fate would be certain to be death. Ghost Marshal Wildsand wanted to put up a final resistance, but just as he was about to make his move, something strange happened. Rumble. In the air, a majestic sword image suddenly pierced through the air, directly smashing against the golden fist image. A rumbling sound erupted in the air, and the golden fist image unexpectedly collapsed together with the sword image, transforming into boundless wild energy that dissipated in the air. This sudden scene caused everyone to gawk, as they raised their heads to look over, only to see a black-clothed figure appearing high up in the sky. This black-clothed figure was extremely strong, and was actually able to block Jiang Lai's punch with a single sword. He was far stronger than Gong Sun Sheng. When Ghost Marshal Wildsand saw the face high up in the sky, his gaze couldn't help but tremble as he cried out a name in his heart. Wind Flame 1,000 Feathers. At this moment, the person that appeared was none other than the Wind Flame 1,000 Feathers. Ghost Marshal Wildsand had never imagined that the Wind Flame 1,000 Feathers would actually appear at this moment. What's more, he didn't expect that the strength of the Wind Flame 1,000 Feathers would actually reach such a level. Chapter 2018. Guiwu Guangsha had already prepared for the worst, but he didn't expect Wind Flame 1,000 Feathers to appear at the crucial moment and block that nearly fatal strike for him. The reason why Wind Flame 1,000 Feathers could block Jiang Lai's punch so easily was because he had already reached the legendary realm of sword and martial arts as one. Guiwu Guangsha was very surprised that Wind Flame 1,000 Feathers had actually broken through to the legendary realm. And looking at Wind Flame 1,000 Feathers' aura, he should have just broken through to the legendary realm not long ago. At this moment, Guiwu Guangsha vaguely understood why Wind Flame 1,000 Feathers would choose this time to attack the divine martial sword pagoda. It turned out that he had broken through to the legendary realm. He already knew that Wind Flame 1,000 Feathers' talent in Sword Dao was extremely high, and that breaking through to the legendary realm was just a matter of time. He just didn't expect it to be this early. Speaking of which, He was a teacher, but he was only at the advanced realm of sword and martial arts as one. He was really ashamed. The sudden appearance of Wind Flame Thousand Feathers stunned everyone. Their expressions became very strange. Who is this person? How can he be so powerful? Yeah, even the Divine Sword Master couldn't take a punch from Lord Zhonglai, but he could easily take it. This is too scary. This person's strength is definitely at the pinnacle. Could he be the Wind and Cloud Alliance Master or the Sacred President? People guessed Wind Flame Thousand Feathers' identity because they could see that the latter's strength was obviously at the same level as Zhonglai. Unfortunately, they guessed wrong. Wind Flame Thousand Feathers was neither the Wind and Cloud Alliance Master nor the Sacred President. It was Thousand Feathers Tower Master. Who are you? Zhonglai was stunned for a moment. He immediately looked at Wind Flame Thousand Feathers and asked coldly. Wind Flame Thousand Feathers' reaction was extremely cold. He said solemnly, "You people who claim to be righteous forces are actually all shameless people." That swordsman called Nie Tian had clearly defeated all his opponents. Just because he used his spirit, you, the Xingtian Alliance Master, said that he doesn't have the qualifications to be the Sword Chief and even wanted to kill him. I would like to ask Alliance Master Jiang, is a mere inky Jade Dragon sword more important than the prestige of your Xingtian Alliance? Wind Flame Thousand Feathers' words were forceful and contained a strong sense of mockery. Zhonglai's expression instantly turned ugly. I don't need you to meddle in how I do things. Zhonglai's expression changed. He looked at the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers with a gloomy gaze and said in a cold voice, "You, on the other hand, have always been hiding nearby. Furthermore, you don't dare to reveal your true identity. From what I can see, you are the one with ulterior motives." Fenghua Qinyu faintly smiled and took a step forward. His figure appeared not far from Zhonglai and said in a loud voice, "Since Alliance Master Jiang wants me to reveal my identity, how can I refuse? I am Master Thousand Feather, Wind Flame Thousand Feather." Master Qinyu. When everyone heard the Wind Flame Qinyu's words, their eyes couldn't help but tremble, and their faces obviously revealed expressions of fear. In the 9 territories besides the Holy Parliament, Wind and Cloud Alliance, and Xingtian Alliance, there were also 3 major dark organizations, namely the Dragnet and Earthnet, Reverse Scale, and Thousand Feathers Tower. The reason why Qianyu Tower and other forces are called dark organizations is mainly because they are too mysterious, and very few people have a deep understanding of them. Qianyu Building was already a very mysterious organization, and its building master was even more unfathomable. Who would have thought that the powerful figure in front of them was the legendary Tower Master Qinyu? Master Qinyu. Zhonglai was startled at first, but then he laughed and said coldly, "I didn't expect you to appear here. It seems that I guessed correctly. You came here with an ulterior motive." Although Zhonglai didn't know the Wind Flame Thousand Feather, he knew another person, and that was the Wind Flame Master. He had also heard a little about the Wind Flame Master in the past. He guessed that the Wind Flame Thousand Feather and the Wind Flame Master must have a very close relationship. The Wind Flame Thousand Feather was most likely here because of the Wind Flame Master's death. Wind Flame Thousand Feather, it's you. On the other side, Gong Sunsheng was also startled, and he looked very surprised. The Wind Flame Thousand Feather used to be a member of the Divine Martial Sword Pagoda, and he had met Gong Sunsheng several times. However, when Gong Sunsheng saw the Wind Flame Thousand Feather again, the latter's aura had completely changed, and he was no longer the young swordsman from back then. He had just fought with the Wind Flame Thousand Feather and had just come out. The latter might be here because of the Wind Flame Master's death. No wonder the Wind Flame Thousand Feather said that he was a debt collector when he first appeared. Debt collector? What debt? Of course, it was for his father's death back then. Gong Sunsheng's expression darkened when he thought of this. He could tell that the Wind Flame Thousand Feather's current strength was not the same as before. If the Wind Flame Thousand Feather believed that the Divine Martial Sword Pagoda was responsible for the Wind Flame Master's death, then he would definitely take revenge. With the Wind Flame Thousand Feather's current strength, he could destroy the entire divine martial sword pagoda by himself. If Gongsun Sheng didn't have the forbidden blood seal in his body, he might be able to fight with the Wind Flame Master. However, he was no match for the Wind Flame Master now. As for Xian Zongfeng, he was definitely no match for the Wind Flame Master. Today seemed to be the divine martial sword pagoda's doomsday. Jiang Lai alone was already very troublesome, and now there was the Wind Flame Master. How could the divine martial sword pagoda deal with him? At this moment, the Wind Flame Master looked at Gongsun Sheng and asked in a cold tone, "Sir Divine Sword Master, you should know why I'm here, right?" Gongsun Sheng's expression darkened with a pained expression. He nodded and said, "Wind Flame Master, if you want to take revenge on the divine martial sword pagoda because of your father's death, then I have no complaints. I'm willing to shoulder all the blame, but please don't drag the other people of the divine martial sword pagoda into this." "Sir Divine Sword Master, you..." Gui Wu Kuangsha's expression changed after hearing Gongsun Sheng's words, but he didn't know what to say. Gongsun Sheng didn't explain anything because he knew that since the Wind Flame Master was here, it would be useless even if he tried to explain. He might as well shoulder all the blame and at least protect the divine martial sword pagoda's dignity. In fact, there were many suspicious points about the Wind Flame Master's death. It was supposed to be a very simple mission. With the Wind Flame Master's strength, it was impossible for anything to happen to him. The strange thing was that the Wind and Fire Masters actually died on that simple mission. Gongsun Sheng had secretly investigated back then, but he couldn't find anything. In the end, he could only let it go. "Sir Divine Sword Master, I respect you as a great swordsman. I don't want to drag the others into my father's death, but other than you, there is one more person who must die." Wind Flame Master nodded and then turned around to look at Xian Zongfeng in the sky. He growled, "Xian Zongfeng, at this moment, don't you want to stand up and say something?" Xian Zongfeng's face instantly turned pale. Chapter 2019. Everyone was stunned when Fenghua Qinyu called out Xian Zongfeng's name. Even Gongsun Shengji's expression changed. He thought to himself, "Xian Zongfeng? Is he related to Fenghua Cheng's death?" Jiang Lai was watching from the side. He was not in a hurry as he wanted to watch the show in front of him. Xian Zongfeng calmed down and stepped out. He pretended to be confused and looked at Fenghua Qinyu. He said, "Fenghua Qinyu, what do you want me to say?" "Say what?" Fenghua Qinyu asked back and said coldly, "Say how you killed my father back then." A cold voice resounded in the air like a clap of thunder. Fenghua Qinyu did not hide at all. He pointed out that Xian Zongfeng was the murderer of Fenghua Cheng. Gongsun Shengji and Gui Wu Kuangsha were stunned when they heard Fenghua Qinyu's words. The shock in their hearts was written on their faces. Both of them had investigated Fenghua Cheng's death before. Who would have thought that the person who killed Fenghua Cheng was right beside them? Moreover, he was the divine martial sword pagoda's sword master Wu. Their first reaction was shock and doubt. But looking at Fenghua Qinyu's expression, he was obviously not lying. Moreover, Fenghua Qinyu had investigated for a long time. If there was no concrete evidence, he would definitely not say it publicly. As soon as Fenghua Qinyu said this, the crowd was in an uproar. "Sword Master Wu, he killed Master Qinyu's father? What's going on?" "Master Qinyu is here to avenge his father's death. There's going to be a good show." "Who is Master Qinyu's father? Why did Sword Master Wu kill him?" The crowd discussed and shifted their attention to Fenghua Qinyu and Xian Zongfeng. Xian Zongfeng's eyes trembled. He forced himself to stay calm and said, "Fenghua Qinyu, I was good friends with your father. Why did I kill him? What do you want this sword master to explain to you for slandering me like that?" "Are you slandering me?" Fenghua Qinyu smiled coldly. He flipped his hand and a soul shadow appeared on his palm. "Zhuo Bufan." Nie Tian's eyes couldn't help but narrow when he saw the face of the soul phantom, and he shouted out name. The soul shadow that gushed out from the palm of the Firestorm Thousand Feathers was none other than Zhuo Bufan. Previously, Zhuo Bufan had been abducted by the Firestorm Thousand Feathers. Unexpectedly, he was only left with a remnant soul. "Zhuo Bufan." Gongsun Sheng and Xian Zongfeng exclaimed at the same time when they saw Zhuo Bufon's soul shadow. Without a doubt, Zhuo Bufon had already been killed by the wind flame Thousand Feathers, and only an incomplete soul remained. Wind flame Thousand Feathers, you're so ruthless. Not only did you destroy his martial body, but you also imprisoned his soul. You really have the heart of a jackal. Xian Zongfeng calmed down and shouted angrily. He shouted like this naturally in order to arouse public indignation, to let everyone witness the wind fire Thousand Plumes viciousness. Needless to say, the wind flame Thousand Feathers was indeed extremely poisonous. Not only did it kill Zhuo Bufon, it even imprisoned his soul. So much nonsense. The wind flame Thousand Feathers completely ignored Xian Zongfeng. He smiled coldly and said, Xian Zongfeng, did you plant that thing in Zhuo Bufon's body? What thing? Xian Zongfeng asked and pretended to be innocent. Feng Huaqianyu sneered and glanced at Zhuo Bufon. The latter said, Lord Swordmaster Wu, you planted a powerful sword seal rune in my body to increase my strength. Have you forgotten? Zhuo Bufon's words made Gong Sun Sheng stunned. The way he looked at Xian Zongfeng also changed. He suddenly remembered that Zhuo Bufon's strength had indeed increased a lot in a short period of time. Could it be that all of this was done by Xian Zongfeng? Nonsense. Xian Zongfeng refused to admit it. He scolded in a deep voice, Zhuo Bufon, when did I plant the sword seal rune in your body? Swordmaster Wu Yu. Although Zhuo Bufon was only left with a broken soul, his mind was still clear. He looked at Xian Zongfeng in surprise. It was the latter who planted the blood-crying sword infant in his body. Why did he not admit it now? Xian Zongfeng, you're the Sword Master Wu of the divine martial sword pagoda. I didn't expect you to be such a villain. You dare to do it, but don't dare to admit it. The disdain and killing intent in Wind Flame Thousand Feathers' eyes intensified. At this time, Xian Zongfeng had made up his mind. He would not admit it no matter what. He shouted, Feng Huaqianyu, you captured Zhuo Bufon, killed him, and imprisoned his soul. Of course, he will say whatever you want him to say. Since you've already determined that this sword master killed your father, then please make your move. At most, this sword master will just die. Xian Zongfeng was very cunning. He knew that he was no match for the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers, so he insisted that the latter was framing him. The eyes of the crowd were flickering. It was obvious that they were questioning Wind Flame Thousand Feathers. Wind Flame Thousand Feathers could ignore the doubts of the others and attack Xian Zongfeng directly. However, he didn't want to do that. Xian Zongfeng, you still don't admit it? As Wind Flame Thousand Feathers spoke, he suddenly flipped his palm. A bloody whirlpool appeared in his palm. The whirlpool quickly changed into the shape of a baby. However, it was red like blood and looked very bloody. This is... Nietian saw this scene, and his eyes narrowed. He exclaimed in his heart, blood-crying sword infant's body. At the same time, Fat Cat's voice rang in his mind. The thing that Wind Flame Thousand Feathers took out was the body of the blood-crying sword infant. Xian Zongfeng, this is the sword seal rune that you left in Zhuo Bufon's body. Wind Flame Thousand Feathers stretched out his palm so that everyone could see the face of the blood-crying sword infant. He said loudly, I have already sensed it. This sword seal rune can increase the sword intent of the swordsman and even increase the talent of the swordsman. But at the same time, the sword seal rune will also absorb the sword intent of the swordsman and gradually change its shape into the shape of a baby. If I am not wrong, once the baby formed by the rune grows up, it will break through the swordsman's martial body and the swordsman will die here. This sword seal rune is clearly stealing the sword intent of the swordsman. Back then, my father also had the aura of this rune in his body. As he spoke, Wind Flame Thousand Feathers looked at Xian Zongfeng and said cold, Xian Zongfeng, the rune in Zhuo Bufon's body was planted by you. You are not helping him, but harming him. He was not killed by me. He was unable to bear the sword seal rune in his body, so his body exploded and he died. Back then, my father also died because of the same reason. I think the sword seal rune in my father's body was also planted by you. Wind Flame Thousand Feathers didn't know what the blood-crying sword infant was, so he could only call it the Sword Seal Rune. Nonsense. Just as Wind Flame Thousand Feathers finished speaking, Xian Zongfeng sneered and said, Wind Flame Thousand Feathers, all of this is your guess. How did your father die? How did you know? How did you know that your father had the aura of the rune in his body? Wind Flame Thousand Feathers' eyes suddenly flickered. He stared fixedly at Xian Zongfeng and said, Because I also have the same Sword Seal rune on my body. As soon as he finished speaking, Wind Flame Thousand Feathers' body shook. A scarlet halo surged out from his body and enveloped his entire body, releasing an extremely bloody aura. When Yetian saw the scarlet halo outside of Wind Flame Thousand Feathers' body, his eyes trembled, and he couldn't help but cry out, Blood-crying sword infant. Chapter 2020. Sobbing Blood Nascent Sword. There is also a sobbing blood nascent sword in Thousand Feathers Wind's body. Tian suddenly reacted, his face full of shock and confusion. He never would have thought that Thousand Feathers Wind's body would also have a sobbing blood nascent sword. How? How is this possible? Not only was Tian surprised, but Xian Zongfeng was even more surprised. The latter's eyes trembled as he exclaimed. Thousand Feathers Wind released the sobbing blood nascent sword's aura, which shocked Tian and Xian Zongfeng. However, when Tian became cold and carefully sensed Thousand Feathers Wind's aura, he found that the latter's sobbing blood nascent sword's aura was very unique. It seemed to be different from the ordinary sobbing blood nascent sword, mixed with an extremely strong bloodline aura. What's going on? Tian's face was even more confused. He clearly did not feel any sobbing blood nascent sword's aura from Thousand Feathers Wind's body, so why did the latter suddenly release it? Understand. Right at this moment, the little fat cat suddenly let out a strange cry, its voice filled with excitement as it cried out, Mutated! Mutated! The blood-sobbing infant sword has mutated. Mutated? Tian was stunned. The sobbing blood nascent sword can mutate. He had heard of mutated spirit beasts with mutated bloodlines, but he did not know that the sobbing blood nascent sword could also mutate. Yes. Fat Cat calmed down, nodded heavily, and said, The sobbing blood nascent sword in Thousand Feathers Wind's body was not planted. It was obtained from the bloodline. What do you mean? Tian was stunned, his face full of confusion. Very simple. Fat Cat laughed and said, Thousand Feathers Wind's body was not planted with the sobbing blood nascent sword. It was inherited from the bloodline. His father, Wind Master Wind's body, had the sobbing blood nascent sword, and he merged it with the bloodline in his body, unexpectedly creating a bloodline power. Therefore, Thousand Feathers Wind's body also has the sobbing blood nascent sword. Moreover, his sobbing blood nascent sword is a bloodline power. It does not harm to him. It is a pure bloodline talent. This allowed him to possess extraordinary talent in the way of the sword. Well, Tian was shocked and didn't know what to say. He had never thought that the Thousand Feathers of Wind Flame's weeping blood nascent sword was actually the power of bloodline. No wonder he couldn't sense it just now. Back then, when Xian Zongfeng planted the blood-sobbing nascent sword in Wind and Fire Union, it unexpectedly created a kind of bloodline power. Through this bloodline, he passed the blood-sobbing nascent sword to Wind and Fire Thousand Feathers. Not surprisingly, Fenghua and Binghong also had the blood-weeping nascent sword within their bodies. However, the difference was that the blood-tier nascent sword of the father and son duo was innately born. It didn't do them any harm, and only increased their talent in the way of the sword. No wonder Fenghua Qinyu was able to reach the legendary realm of sword and martial unity. Fenghua Binghong was so young, but his sword Dao strength was so monstrous. So it was because of the blood-weeping sword infant. It was precisely because Qianyu had the blood-tier nascent sword in his body that he firmly believed that his father was killed by someone. Xian Zongfeng, what else do you have to say? Qianyu said coldly, looking at Xian Zongfeng with an extremely strong murderous intent. Xian Zongfeng was stunned. He was also stunned by the scene in front of him. For a moment, he couldn't react, but he immediately calmed down and said, Qianyu, what can you prove with your words alone? How can you prove that I am the one who did these things? Qian Yu's eyes darkened. He didn't expect that at this point. Xian Zongfeng still wouldn't admit it. He is not alone. However, right at that moment, a voice sounded out. Soon after, a figure appeared and arrived beside Gui Wu Kuangsha. It was Nie Tian. Nie Tian. Xian Zongfeng's pupil shrank. He didn't expect Nie Tian to stand up at this time. Nie Tian? Why did he stand up? The crowd was also stunned, looking at Nie Tian with a puzzled face. Could it be that Nie Tian had something to do with this matter? Xian Zongfeng, see me stand up. Are you panicking? Nie Tian smiled faintly, looking at Xian Zongfeng with a playful face. Panicking? Why should I panic? Xian Zongfeng pretended to be calm and asked sternly. Since that's the case, then I will tell you everything I know. Nie Tian smiled and said loudly, the sword seal rune in Zhou Bufon's body is called the Blood Tear Nascent Sword. It is an evil technique to cultivate sword intent. This evil technique first plants the Blood Tear Nascent Sword seed in the warrior's body. Then the Blood Tear Nascent Sword will continuously absorb the sword intent in the swordsman's body, and thus become stronger and stronger. When the Blood Tear Nascent Sword matures, the person who planted the Blood Tear Nascent Sword will take it out of the swordsman's body, and then take the sword intent in the Blood Tear Nascent Sword for himself. What an evil technique! Hearing Nie Tian's words, the crowd's expression changed and became frightened. Xian Zongfeng looked at Nie Tian with a stunned face, his expression clearly saying, How do you know this? Nie Tian smiled faintly and continued, The Blood Tear Nascent Sword in Zhou Bufon's body was indeed planted by Xian Zongfeng. Not only that, Xian Zongfeng also planted the Blood Tear Nascent Sword in Lian Wui's body. However, due to a freak combination of factors, the Blood Tear Nascent Sword in Lian Wui's body was transferred to another swordsman. Nie Tian, you are speaking nonsense. Xian Zongfeng could no longer remain calm and roared madly. Nie Tianling laughed, completely ignoring Xian Zongfeng, and continued, The reason why I know this is because I also have the Blood Tear Nascent Sword in my body, and it was Xian Zongfeng who ordered someone to give it to me. However, my martial body is different from ordinary martial artists, and I swallowed the Blood Tear Nascent Sword. Nonsense! You're talking nonsense. You are framing me. Xian Zongfeng's face was pale, and he shouted like a madman. Framing me? The corners of Nie Tian's mouth curled up as he asked, Lord Swordmaster Wu, may I ask why I would want to frame you? What good would it do me? At this time, the crowd's gaze changed, and they all focused on Xian Zongfeng, looking at him as if they were looking at a monster. Xian Zongfeng, it was really you. At this time, Gong Sunxing opened his mouth and looked at Xian Zongfeng with a face full of shock. How could he have thought that such a vicious person was hiding by his side? Gong Sunxing originally had doubts about Feng Huiqianyu's words, but Nie Tian's appearance made him unable to doubt it anymore. Although he had not known Nie Tian for a long time, but he could see that the latter was definitely not the kind of person who would speak without thinking. Xian Zongfeng's face changed at this time, and he was extremely shocked. He knew that at this time, even if he did not admit it, it would be useless. Everyone believed Feng Huiqianyu and Nie Tian's words. So what if it was me? Suddenly, Xian Zongfeng roared, and a strange smile appeared on his face. His whole person seemed to have gone crazy, and he laughed crazily. I am a swordsman, and I am pursuing a higher realm of the sword. Is this wrong? If you have the Blood Tear Nascent Sword in your hands, you will definitely do the same thing. Finally, you admit it. Nie Tianling smiled coldly and said indifferently, Pursuing a higher realm of the sword is not wrong, but you should not use such evil means. Chapter 2021. Feng Huiqianyu took a step in the air, and the aura of his entire body instantly rose to the limit. His entire body was surging with a vast and powerful and frightening sword intent. His entire body was like an ocean where sword intent converged, giving off an extremely intense pressure. Such a powerful sword aura. Nie Tian was shocked by Feng 1,000 Feathers' powerful aura. This was the most terrifying sword aura he had ever seen. Even Gongsun Xingji at his peak would not be able to release such a violent sword aura. After today, the title of the #1 sword wielder in the 9 regions would change. From 1,000 feather strength had surpassed Gongsun Xingji. He was the real #1 sword wielder in the 9 regions. This man's sword cultivation is terrifying. It seems that the blood-sobbing sword infant has greatly improved his bloodline. Otherwise, he wouldn't have such terrifying strength. Fat Cat's voice was heard, praising Feng 1,000 feather strength. Feng 1,000 feathers was able to block Jiang Lai's punch so easily because of his terrifying strength. Jiang Lai looked at Feng 1,000 feathers and was obviously shocked. "You're so powerful." Xian Zongfeng's eyes trembled, and he could not hide the fear on his face. He obviously did not expect Feng 1,000 feather strength to reach such a terrifying level. "Xian Zongfeng, it's time for you to pay the price." Feng 1,000 feathers said cold. His sword aura surged in the air. It was as if space was under great pressure and was going to collapse at any time. "Feng 1,000 feathers, I admit that you're indeed powerful, but it's impossible for you to kill me." Xian Zongfeng's eyes flickered, and his face regained some calmness. He smirked slyly. He knew that he could not fight Feng 1,000 feathers, but he was confident that he could leave safely. "Is that so?" Feng 1,000 feathers sneered. The murderous intent in his eyes turned solid and shrouded Xian Zongfeng. He was furious, but he remained calm. He knew that Xian Zongfeng must have some extraordinary skills to hide in the Shenwu Sword Pagoda for so long. Hence, he dared not be careless. At this moment, Xian Zongfeng sneered and flipped his palm. A jade-like elixir appeared in his palm. He swallowed it without hesitation, and his sword aura began to skyrocket. Boom! 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 Waves of violent sword force surged out, and the space around the profound Zongfeng actually had a very subtle change. It was as if it was filled with a mysterious sword intent, showing a kind of dense mist state. It was very strange. When Yetian saw the situation, he couldn't help being stunned and asked curiously, "What is that medicinal pill?" Why did the sword momentum of Xian Zongfeng's body start to skyrocket after he consumed it? "If I'm not mistaken, that should be a pill condensed from the blood-weeping sword infant," the fat cat exclaimed, clearly very surprised. He was right. What Xian Zongfeng consumed was the nascent sword elixir, which was equivalent to an essence burst elixir. It could greatly enhance his sword intent. With the help of the nascent sword pill, the might of the profound Zongfeng's sword intent skyrocketed. In just a blink of an eye, the sword aura around him was already faintly not weaker than the Firestorm 1,000 feathers. "Ha! The effect of the nascent sword elixir is better than I expected. My sword art realm has actually reached the legendary realm of sword and martial arts as one." Xian Zongfeng could feel his strength skyrocketing, and he couldn't help but laugh wildly. His eyes actually surged with cold, killing intent. Just now, he only wanted to consume the nascent sword elixir to temporarily block the Firestorm 1,000 feathers and then wait for an opportunity to escape. However, the effect of the nascent sword elixir was beyond his expectation. Now, he didn't want to leave, but wanted to kill the Firestorm 1,000 feathers directly. Another legendary swordsman. The crowd also felt Xian Zongfeng's aura. Their eyes trembled violently, and they subconsciously stepped back. Who would have thought that there would be 2 legendary swordsmen at the scene, and these 2 people were going to fight to the death? The Firestorm 1,000 feathers' eyes slightly sank, and then he immediately roared, "Xian Zongfeng, your strength has increased at the right time. If you're killed by my sword, it'll really be too easy for you." "Arrogant," Xian Zongfeng growled, and his whole body released a wild, killing intent. At the same time, a long sword appeared in his hand, and without any hesitation, he directly slashed out. Boom! Suddenly, the endless sword intent surged, and a huge sword shadow appeared, pouring down from the sky, and fell towards the Firestorm 1,000 feathers. Almost at the same time, the Firestorm 1,000 feathers figure also moved and the sword intent around his body bloomed in an instant. A terrifying sword light shot out 10,000 meters away, and a majestic sword shadow appeared, going against the momentum, and slashed towards the sky. Two huge sword shadows, one above and one below, were like two giant dragons that were about to collide. Oh no! Seeing this, Nietion's face suddenly changed, and he directly shouted, "Everyone leave!" The strength of the firestorm Thousand Feathers and Xianzongfeng was too terrifying, and the two of them actually used their full strength in the first confrontation. Most of the people present had the strength below the supreme god level, and even the airwaves caused by the collision could not withstand it. The others immediately reacted and immediately retreated. At this moment, the two huge sword shadows collided with a loud bang. Rumble! There was a loud roar in the sky, and the terrifying sword intent airwaves rolled in the sky, spreading in all directions, like the Nine Heavens River bursting a dam. Extremely sharp sword intent surged out like a raging sea wave, wreaking havoc in the space. Many people who did not retreat in time were directly hit by the sword intent airwaves, and there were even many people who could not withstand the impact of the sword intent, and their martial bodies directly collapsed, turning into blood light and dissipating. In the space, the surrounding sword field was also impacted. Even with the protection of the sword formation, it could not withstand the attack of the sword intent. The sword formation collapsed, and the sword field stone pillars directly turned into stone powder. Even the magnificent mountain tens of thousands of meters away was greatly impacted and shook violently, as if it was going to collapse in the next moment. Nietion reacted quickly, and in time, he retreated tens of thousands of meters away and was not injured. However, his face was very shocked, and the scene in front of him was beyond his expectations. At this moment, he only knew how big the gap between him and the real experts was. Although he had successfully defeated Song Lan, a monstrous sword art genius, in the quarterfinals, the battle between them and the battle in front of him was not on the same level. It was not an exaggeration to say that if Nietion was a little closer, he would have been dead by now. The firestorm Thousand Feathers and the mysterious Songfeng were indeed legendary swordsmen. The clash of their swords was truly earth-shattering. Many people, because of their weak strength, could not dodge in time, and became cannon fodder under the firestorm Thousand Feathers and Xianzongfeng swords. At this time, the sword intent retreated, and two figures appeared in the sky. It was the firestorm Thousand Feathers and Xianzongfeng. The battle between the two had just begun. Killing intent. Nietion looked at the two people in the sky, and suddenly his heart sank. He felt a terrifying killing intent. Chapter 2022. Nietion originally wanted to see how terrifying the battle between the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers and Xianzongfeng would be. He also wanted to comprehend the legendary sword intent realm of a swordsman. However, he did not expect that Jiang Lai would appear at this time. Little brat of the Nye clan, are you ready to die? Jiang Lai coldly stared at Nietion and spoke in a cold tone. He did not care about the battle between the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers and Xianzongfeng. He only cared about Nietion's life. He came here to ensure that Nietion must die. However, the appearance of the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers suddenly interrupted him, causing him to be delayed for a while. Jiang Lai, with your status, are you really going to attack a junior? At this moment, Guiwu Quangsha's voice resounded, immediately descending to Nietion's side. He had been paying close attention to Nietion, not relaxing in the slightest. Guiwu Quangsha, don't think that just because you are a member of the Guiwu clan, I won't dare to kill you. Jiang Lai's expression, let me tell you, today, no one can stop me from killing Nietion. Whoever dares to stop me will only have one ending, death. Nietion was too monstrous. Jiang Lai would not allow him to live. Shameless. Guiwu Quangsha roared. The sword intent on his body surged, obviously wanting to fight to the death with Jiang Lai. Ridiculous. Facing the furious Guiwu Quangsha, Jiang Lai smiled cold and said, You want to stop me? overestimate yourself. As his disdainful voice faded, Jiang Lai's body shook, and a heaven-punishing armor appeared once again. A golden giant that was tens of thousands of meters tall appeared in the sky, and directly punched down towards Niet Tian and the ghost martial wild sand. This fist, Jiang Lai did not show any mercy, obviously wanting to kill Niet Tian and Guiwu Guangsha. Guiwu Ninth Heaven, demonic flow blood. Seeing this, Guiwu Guangsha's expression changed. Immediately after, blood spurted out from his body. Suddenly, blood chi and sword intent surged together, forming a huge sword formation. Lord Guiwu. Upon seeing this, Niet Tian's expression couldn't help but change. How could he not see that Guiwu Guangsha was burning his blood and chi, using his life to resist Jiang Lai's fist? For the sake of saving Niet Tian, Guiwu Guangsha had gambled everything. Boom! Sword intent crazily gushed out from Guiwu Guangsha's body as he activated the 9 heavenly demonic flow array. Endless sword intent runes circulated within the space, transforming into a sword array shield, enveloping him and Niet Tian. Boom! In the next moment, a terrifying fist descended like a mountain, bombarding the 9 heavenly demonic flow sword formation. The formation shook violently, and in the next moment, it actually cracked open. Crisp cracking sounds resounded in the air. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the 9 heavenly demonic flow formation collapsed as a terrifying power descended. The figures of Guiwu Guangsha and Niet Tian were sent flying backwards, leaving a bloody trail in the air. Teacher, Niet Tian. Seeing this scene from afar, Guiwu Chan couldn't help but cry out in fear, his face filled with terror. In the air, Niet Tian felt incomparable pain throughout his body, as though he was about to explode. Using the last strand of his strength, a pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back, allowing him to stabilize himself. Lord Guiwu. Niet Tian hugged Guiwu Guangsha. The latter's entire body was a mess of blood and flesh, and his aura was weak, as though he was on the verge of death. Guiwu Guangsha had ignited his blood and chi to activate the 9 heavenly demonic flow sword formation, which was already a huge burden on him. Coupled with the punch from Jiang Lai, one could well imagine the severity of his injuries. Niet Tian, I'm sorry. My strength isn't enough. No, I can no longer protect you. Guiwu Guangsha looked at Niet Tian as he spoke with great difficulty. In his heart, he was actually unable to protect Niet Tian. Lord Guiwu. Niet Tian roared in a low voice as energy from the earth vein origin gushed out from his body, crazily gushing into Guiwu Guangsha's body. This was the last bit of energy from the earth vein origin within Niet Tian's body, and it finally stabilized Guiwu Guangsha's aura. Teacher. At this moment, Guiwu Chan's figure appeared. Seeing Guiwu Guangsha on the verge of death, he felt incomparable grief. Bastard, I'll fight it out with you. All of a sudden, Guiwu Chan raised his head to look at Jiang Lai, as flames of fury gushed out from his eyes. He actually wanted to fight it out with Jiang Lai, but was stopped by Niet Tian's hand. Guiwu Guangsha was seriously injured, and Niet Tian was similarly grieved. However, he still maintained his calm. Jiang Lai was too strong. Guiwu Guangsha had ignited his blood and chi, yet he was still unable to block a single palm from Jiang Lai. If Guiwu Chan were to rush over, he would definitely be sending himself to his death. Guiwu Guangsha, being able to receive a punch from this alliance chief without dying is already extremely good. Jiang Lai smiled coldly. Staring at Niet Tian with a pair of cold eyes, he said, Niet Tian, now that Guiwu Guangsha can't hold on any longer, let's see who else can save you. Gongsun Xingji and Guiwu Guangsha had both been defeated by a single punch from Jiang Lai. From the looks of it, no one would be able to save Niet Tian. Jiang Lai, you're the dignified alliance chief of the Xingtian Alliance, an expert at the pinnacle of the 9 great domains. Yet, you're actually so pleased with yourself for killing a junior like me. Should I say that you're shameless? Or should I say that you're shameless? Raising his head to look at Jiang Lai, there wasn't the slightest bit of fear in his eyes. Instead, there was a playful expression on his face. "You're courting death." Jiang Lai's expression instantly turned ugly as a sinister voice rumbled out from his throat. In the next instant, he sent a palm smashing down. He had already made up his mind to kill. Naturally, he wouldn't change his mind just because of a few words from Nie Tian. It didn't matter if he was shameless or shameless. In any case, Nie Tian had to die today. In the face of Jiang Lai's fatal palm strike, sword force rose from Nie Tian's entire body as he swung the starlight heaven slash in his hand. A sword shadow whistled through the air as it charged towards Jiang Lai. Even if Nie Tian knew that his strength wasn't even worth mentioning in front of Jiang Lai, even if he knew that he wasn't Jiang Lai's match, even if he knew that this battle was destined to end in failure, he definitely wouldn't give up. He would definitely fight to the end. This was Nie Tian. Even at the very last moment, he wouldn't give up and would resist till the very end. "Die, Ant!" Jiang Lai roared as if he had gone mad. His eyes shone with a blazing light, as though he could already see the scene of Nie Tian being annihilated with a single palm strike. The terrifying palm descended with a loud rumble, and Nie Tian's sword shadow immediately shattered in the air. The power of this palm strike was extremely terrifying. If it landed, Nie Tian would definitely die. Nie Tian. At this moment, a clear voice rang out. Then, a figure appeared and charged straight towards them. "Share!" Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he turned around to see the figure. He couldn't help but cry out in surprise. He hadn't expected that Cher would actually appear at this moment. Cher wasn't weak, and she was also wearing the Emperor of the Underworld's saint robe. Unfortunately, her opponent was Jiang Lai. Even if she were to make a move, she would only die together with Nie Tian. "Your Royal Highness." Almost at the same time, a panicked voice rang out. It was the person who had been hiding beside Cher, Earth Leader. Earth Leader had never expected that Cher would suddenly make a move in order to save Nie Tian. Earth Leader wanted to make a move, but it was already too late. Nie Tian and Cher's lives were hanging by a thread at the same time. "Jiang Lai, stop!" At this moment, a thunderous roar suddenly rang out in the sky. Then, a 10,000-meter-long golden ray of light appeared in the sky. It was like a giant sword as it attacked Jiang Lai. "Grandfather!" Nie Tian's expression changed when he heard the voice in the sky, and he cried out in his heart. Chapter 2023. Nie Dao. In the sky, Jiang Lai suddenly heard a thunderous roar. His expression changed, and he exclaimed in his heart. He had never imagined that Nie Dao would appear at this moment. Jiang Lai's brain worked rapidly. He could already feel a powerful force blasting towards him. If he insisted on killing Nie Tian, he could definitely do it, but the price he would pay was being heavily injured by Nie Dao. If he killed Nie Tian, but was heavily injured by Nie Dao would definitely not let him leave this place alive. He really wanted to kill Nie Tian, but Nie Tian's life was clearly not as important as his. He would not give up his life for Nie Tian. Damn it! Jiang Lai reacted instantly. He growled and gave up on killing Nie Tian. He turned around and slapped at the golden light in the sky. Nie Tian's eyes flashed with passion when he saw this. His figure moved, and he retreated several thousand meters away. Boom! At the same time, Nie Dao and Jiang Lai clashed head-on. There was a huge explosion in the sky, and Jiang Lai's figure was forced to take a few steps back. Jiang Lai's strength was originally about the same as Nie Dao's. However, the latter had attacked first, so he had the upper hand. Jiang Lai was on the defensive, so he was slightly weaker. The two experts clashed. Terrifying waves of air surged out, and the crowd was forced to retreat again. The entire sea of Evil Edge was filled with an extremely frightening power. After a while, the waves of air dissipated, and two figures appeared in the sky. It was Nie Dao and Jiang Lai. That was close. Nie Tian looked at Nie Dao from afar and let out a long breath. It had to be said that Nie Dao had appeared at the right time. If he had come a little later, the consequences would have been unimaginable. This person is the Wind and Cloud Alliance Master. At this time, the crowd finally reacted. They looked at the tyrannical figure with fear. Someone exclaimed, "Wind and Cloud, Alliance Master." Most people were shocked, as if they couldn't believe the scene in front of them. The Wind and Cloud Alliance and the Heavenly Punishment Alliance were the strongest forces in the Nine Realms. How could the people not be shocked when the leaders of these two alliances appeared at the same time? No one had expected the Wind and Cloud Alliance Master to suddenly appear here and attack Xingtian Alliance Master. They didn't know the relationship between Niet Dao and Niet Tian, so they had no idea what was going on. However, the battle between the two Alliance Masters was something that everyone was looking forward to. They all widened their eyes, waiting for Niet Dao and Jiang Lai to fight again. At this moment, the battle between Wind Flame Thousand Feathers and Xian Zongfeng was still going on. Both of them had already reached the sky, and the battle had reached its climax. However, the majority of the crowd's gazes were focused on Niet Dao and Jiang Lai. It was clear that these two were more famous and more attractive. "Cher, are you all right?" Niet Tian became cold. He looked at Cher and asked nervously. "I'm fine." Cher shook her head, but there was a puzzled look on her face. She was also puzzled. Why did she rush over when she saw Niet Tian in danger? Could it be that we really knew each other? Cher looked at Niet Tian and asked doubtfully. Niet Tian confirmed that Cher was fine and didn't say anything else. He then turned his attention to Niet Dao and Jiang Lai. "Jiang Lai, you're shameless." Niet Tian glanced at Niet Tian. Seeing that the latter was fine, he finally calmed down a little. However, his eyes were still filled with anger as he glared at Jiang Lai and roared. Niet Dao naturally knew about the evil-edged sword competition. However, he believed in Niet Tian's strength, so he didn't plan on participating in this matter. Moreover, his relationship with Gongsun Sheng was very strained. This was also the reason why he didn't come to the Evil Edge Sea. But later on, he heard some things, so he immediately rushed over. Fortunately, he came in time. Otherwise, Niet Tian would be in danger. He never expected that someone of Jiang Lai's status would publicly attack Niet Tian. He knew Jiang Lai very well, but he didn't expect the latter to be shameless to this extent. "Brother Nye, I didn't expect you to come as well." What a surprise. Jiang Lai's expression was very ugly, but he still managed to maintain his composure. He knew that with Niet Dao's appearance, it was impossible for Niet Tian to kill him. To be honest, he was a little wary of Niet Dao. In the past, the Xingtian Alliance and Fengyan Alliance were once allies. Jiang Lai and Niet Dao's relationship was not bad. The two had sparred before, and although there was no clear victor, Jiang Lai faintly felt that his strength was slightly weaker than Niet Dao's. Even the slightest gap between the pinnacle experts would be very obvious in a battle. Jiang Lai estimated that if he and Niet Dao fought to the death, he only had a 40% chance of winning, while Niet Dao had a 60% chance of winning. Because of this, his reaction was very cautious. "Jiang Lai, we have not been friends for a long time. People like you don't deserve to be brothers with me." Niet Dao growled cold. "You should be glad that you didn't kill Niet Tian. Otherwise, you would definitely die here today." Niet Dao was very angry, but fortunately, Niet Tian was fine, so he could still maintain his calm. The reason why he didn't attack Niet Dao was because he was not only Niet Tian's grandfather, but also the leader of the Fengyan Alliance. His identity determined that he couldn't be impulsive. He was very clear how terrifying Jiang Lai's strength was. If he fought with Jiang Lai now, it was very likely that both sides would suffer. The Fengyan Alliance's enemy wasn't just the Xingtian Alliance, but the Holy Parliament. If something happened to Niet Dao, the Holy Parliament would definitely act against the Fengyan Alliance without hesitation. He didn't want to see that happen. Actually, Jiang Lai had the same thoughts. He didn't want to fight to the death with Niet Dao because he was afraid that the Holy Parliament would reap the benefits. Although the Holy Parliament and the Xingtian Alliance had a good relationship, it would be hard to say if Jiang Lai died. The Holy Parliament had always had the ambition to destroy the two alliances and reign supreme over the 9 regions. If Niet Dao and Jiang Lai died together, then the Fengyan Alliance and the Xingtian Alliance would no longer have the right to continue existing. Hua Jiushan was extremely ruthless. He wouldn't go easy on the two alliances. Niet Dao and Jiang Lai both knew this, which was why they could maintain their calm at this moment. Jiang Lai's expression was dark and extremely embarrassed, but he still restrained himself. He pondered for a moment, then said, "Nie Dao, there is bound to be a battle between us, but now is not the time." With that, Jiang Lai turned around and prepared to leave. With Nie Dao's appearance, it was no longer possible for him to kill Nie Tian. There was no longer any meaning in staying here. Nie Dao looked on cold, but he obviously wouldn't stop him. His goal was to save people, not to fight to the death with Jiang Lai. Wait! But at this moment, Nie Tian's voice suddenly rang out. His figure moved and appeared beside Nie Dao. Jiang Lai was slightly stunned. He turned around to look at Nie Tian and asked in a cold voice, "Stinking brat, what else do you want?" Chapter 2024. Jiang Lai was just about to leave when he was stopped by Nie Tian, who demanded the Ink Jade Dragon Sword. Before the battle royale, Nie Tian and Jiang Lai had agreed that if Nie Tian became the chief sword of the Evil Edge sword competition, Jiang Lai would have to hand over the Ink Jade Dragon Sword. This was also the condition that Nie Tian agreed to participate in the battle royale. Now that Nie Tian was the chief sword, according to the agreement, Jiang Lai had a hand over the Ink Jade Dragon Sword. Jiang Lai's expression instantly became ugly. He did not expect that Nie Tian would still dare to raise such a condition at this time. If it was a normal cultivator, they would have been scared speechless, let alone raising conditions. However, Nie Tian was completely different. He acted as if he did not know fear and raised conditions just like before. Moreover, from Nie Tian's point of view, this was a very normal thing because it was fulfilling the agreement. "Brat, do you really want the Ink Jade Dragon Sword?" Jiang Lai's expression was cold, and his eyes emitted an undisguised, threatening aura as he asked in a deep voice. Of course. Nie Tian, however, turned a blind eye to the threat and said in a loud voice, "Everyone here can testify that the agreement between us is still valid. Since the Divine Sword Master has announced that I am the chief sword of the Evil Edge sword competition, then the Ink Jade Dragon Sword is naturally mine." In the end, Nie Tian's eyes flickered and he looked at Jiang Lai with a playful expression. "Alliance leader Jiang, with your status, you won't go back on your word in front of everyone, right?" Jiang Lai's gaze darkened, and his face was so dark that it seemed like it was dripping blood. He seemed to be thinking about something. "Nie Tian, what is going on?" At this time, Nie Dao's expression changed slightly, and he asked. With a faint smile on his face, Nie Tian explained what had happened earlier. "Jiang Lai, you are more vicious than I imagined. You actually have such thoughts about a junior." After listening, Nie Dao could naturally tell that this was Jiang Lai's method to kill Nie Tian. He could not help but say with a dark expression, "Jiang Lai, your scheme failed. Do you still want to go back on your word?" Only now did Nie Dao realize exactly how ruthless Jiang Lai was in order to kill Nie Tian. He wished for nothing more than to tear Jiang Lai into 1,000 pieces and skin him alive. However, Jiang Lai was truly ruthless. He actually dared to use the Ink Jade Dragon Sword as a wager. At this moment, Jiang Lai's expression was extremely ugly. It was clear that he was hesitating whether or not he should hand over the Ink Jade Dragon Sword. If it was anything else, he would have handed it over without any hesitation. However, the Ink Jade Dragon Sword was too precious. It was a genuine, sacred tool. "Alliance Master Jiang, it's just a joke. Why take it so seriously?" At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out. Soon after, a figure appeared behind Jiang Lai. "Nangong Duxiu." Nie Tian was startled. He looked at that figure and shouted her name. Who would have thought that Nangong Duxiu would appear at this time and even say a joke? It was clear that Nangong Duxiu was standing on Jiang Lai's side. She was trying to exonerate him. However, her words were a bit too shameless. "What a good joke." Nie Tian's gaze froze, and he sneered. "President Nangong's words are truly shocking. Back when Alliance Master Jiang made an agreement with me, you didn't stand up and point out that he was joking. Why are you spouting nonsense now that it's Alliance Master Jiang's turn to hand over the Ink Jade Dragon Sword? Little bastard, who are you calling a dog?" Nangong Duxiu was startled at first, but he quickly reacted. His old face turned red as he roared angrily. It had never occurred to him that, given his status, Nietian would dare to insult him in front of so many people in such an unbridled manner. Calling you a dog is an insult to a dog, Niet Tianling replied coldly. He wasn't afraid of Nangong Duxiu at all. In any case, he was already on the Sacred Parliament's death list. So what if he cursed Nangong Duxiu? Little bastard, you are courting death. Nangong Duxiu was extremely furious. His aura instantly surged, and he looked like a porcupine. However, he only dared to look at Nietian from afar. He didn't dare to move. Nie Dao was just standing to the side. How could he let Nangong Duxiu injure Nietian? At this time, Nie Dao also spoke. He spoke in a cold tone. Nangong Duxiu, I thought that Jiang Lai was shameless enough. I didn't expect you to be even more shameless. I will tell you that no matter what you say, you must hand over the ink Jade Dragon Sword today. Otherwise, even if I has to risk my life, I will make you pay the price. After saying that, Nie Dao's body shook. His entire body released thousands of golden radiances. Instantly, the entire space was filled with dazzling radiances. What a powerful aura! Nie Tian was incomparably shocked when he sensed the aura around Nie Dao. He could sense that Nie Dao was releasing the spirit confinement power of the spirit confinement fetus. It was extremely terrifying. It was even stronger than the wind flame, thousand feathers, and mysterious Zongfeng's sword intent aura. From this, it could be seen that even legendary swordsmen, like the wind flame, thousand feathers, and mysterious Zongfeng, were slightly weaker than an expert like Nie Dao. In the 9 major realms, there were many peak paramount god experts. However, there weren't many who could reach that level of battle prowess. For example, Guiwu Guangsha, Nangong Duxiu, and Nie Dao. They were all peak paramount gods, but there was a huge difference in their battle prowess. This was mainly because there was a huge difference in their martial physiques. At the same realm, the stronger the martial physique, the stronger the battle prowess. At the later stages, the difference in martial physiques became even more obvious. Nie Dao was able to stand at the peak because of his spirit confinement fetus. That was his most terrifying aspect. Jiang Lai was able to contend against Nie Dao because of his Xingtian bloodline. Nangong Duxiu was weaker than Nie Dao and Jiang Lai, not in terms of realm, but in terms of martial physique and bloodline. All of the paramount gods understood this. Therefore, Jiang Lai, Nangong Duxiu, and the others knew that if Nie Tian reached the peak paramount god realm, he would definitely become an invincible existence in the 9 major realms. Nie Dao was only a spirit confinement fetus, but he was already a peak existence in the 9 major realms. Nie Tian had a god-devil nascent embryo, which was a bloodline power that was far more terrifying than the spirit confinement fetus. Once he reached the peak, it would be unimaginable. Nie Tian's current battle prowess was the best proof. This was the reason why Jiang Lai and Nangong Duxiu were so anxious to kill Nie Tian. Nie Tian was simply too formidable. They couldn't stand by and watch such a formidable enemy grow stronger and stronger without any restrictions. When Jiang Lai and Nangong Duxiu sensed Nie Dao's aura, their expressions changed. Their old faces were as unsightly as could be. Jiang Lai was very familiar with Nie Dao. The latter wasn't someone who would bluff. If Jiang Lai didn't hand over the Ink Jade Dragon Sword, Nie Dao might really go all out. Are we really going to hand over the Ink Jade Dragon Sword? But the Ink Jade Dragon Sword was too important. This made Jiang Lai hesitate. Alliance Master Jiang, you're the Alliance Master at any rate. If you go back on your word to a junior, then wouldn't you become the laughingstock of the world? At this moment, another voice resounded, and it carried a trace of ridicule and disdain. Chapter 2025. Upon hearing Earth Chief's words, Nie Tian's face, which was already the color of an eggplant, turned even greener. He did not care about the other party's mockery, but he did care about the latter's attitude. In such a situation, Earth Chief's interjection was not to mock Jiang Lai, but to express his stance. In truth, Nie Dao and Nie Tian could also see that Jiang Lai was hesitating because of Nangong Duxiu. Nangong Dushio's battle power was indeed weaker than Niet Dao and Jiang Lai's, but it was not to be underestimated. Under normal circumstances, Niet Dao and Jiang Lai would have a 60% chance of winning in a life-and-death battle, while Jiang Lai had a 40% chance. But with Nangong Dushio, the odds would be reversed. Niet Dao would only have a 40% chance of winning, while Jiang Lai would have a 60% chance. It was precisely because of this that Jiang Lai hesitated. But now, Earth Chief had suddenly stepped forward to express his stance. He was standing on Niet Tian's side. In this way, Jiang Lai no longer had the slightest advantage. Earth Chief's strength was no weaker than Nangong Dushio's. Alliance Master Jiang, have you decided? As smart as Niet Tian was, if Jiang Lai could think of something like this, he could also think of it. He couldn't help but smile faintly and put on a calm expression. Jiang Lai's expression changed slightly. He knew that if he did not hand over the Ink Jade Dragon Sword, a fierce battle would be unavoidable. Okay. After a long moment of hesitation, Jiang Lai finally spoke. His eyes flickered with a sinister light as he flipped his palm, took out a black sword, and threw it to Niet Tian. He said in a cold voice, "The Ink Jade Dragon Sword is for you." Alliance Master Jiang is so generous. Niet Tian took the black long sword and didn't forget to mock Jiang Lai. Immediately after, he sent his divine sense into the black long sword. However, strangely enough, his divine sense was repelled by a force. Niet Tian's expression changed, and he was quite surprised. Niet Tian, this sword is indeed the Inky Jade Dragon Sword. However, there is a spiritual seal within the body of the sword. There seems to be a soul imprisoned within it. At this moment, the fat cat's voice rang out as it spoke to Niet Tian. Niet Tian nodded his head as his lips curled into a smile. He then put away the Ink Jade Dragon Sword. Goodbye. Jiang Lai didn't care about Niet Tian's reaction. After a sneer, he turned around and left. Now that the Ink Jade Dragon Sword was in his hands, Niet Tian naturally wouldn't care about Jiang Lai anymore. He let the latter leave. Nangong Dushio's eyes surged with cold intent. She coldly glanced at Niet Tian before leaving. Looking at Jiang Lai and Nangong Dushio's silhouettes, the corners of Niet Tian's mouth rose. He bitterly smiled and said, "It seems like these people can't hold back anymore. They want to kill me immediately." The commotion caused by the evil-edged sword exchange was greater than Niet Tian had imagined. His growth speed was too terrifying. It had already reached the point where the Xing-Tian alliance and the Sacred Parliament couldn't sit idly by. His future path would probably be even more difficult. Fortunately, the Ink Jade Dragon Sword was in his hands. Since the fat cat had confirmed that the black sword was the Ink Jade Dragon Sword, Niet Tian was no longer in a hurry. Fortunately, Nine-God Calamity didn't appear. Otherwise, today's matter wouldn't have been so simple. Niet Dao looked at the figures of Jiang Lai and the others and said solemnly. Niet Tian faintly smiled and said, "Right now, Nine-God Calamity is probably cultivating in seclusion in the glazed demon pagoda. How could she have the time to appear here?" Nine-God Calamity was definitely cultivating in the glazed demon pagoda. Otherwise, she would have personally appeared. If that was the case, things would be troublesome. Everyone was disappointed to see Jiang Lai and Nangong Dushio leave. They originally hoped that Niet Dao and Jiang Lai would have a great battle, but they didn't expect such an ending. Meanwhile, in the sky above, the battle between Wind Flame Thousand Feathers and Xian Zongfeng was still ongoing. The battle between the two had reached its climax. It looked like a life and death battle was about to happen. These two have such powerful sword intents. Who are they? Niet Dao's expression changed when he sensed the sword intents. One is the Thousand Feathers Pavilion Lord, and the other is the Divine Martial Sword Pagoda's Swordmaster Wu. Niet Tian said before turning his attention to Wind Flame Thousand Feathers and Xian Zongfeng. At this moment, Wind Flame Thousand Feathers had the absolute advantage and was suppressing Xian Zongfeng. Die! Wind Flame Thousand Feathers roared and slashed with his sword. Suddenly, a mighty sword shadow with a massive sword pressure pressed down on Xian Zongfeng. Xian Zongfeng's eyes slightly trembled. Although the sword intent around him was still sharp, his sword aura was slowly weakening. The nascent sword divine elixir he had just consumed could not last much longer. Xian Zongfeng didn't expect Wind Flame Thousand Feathers to be so powerful. Otherwise, he would have left immediately instead of fighting for so long. But now, it was too late for him to leave. Wind Flame Thousand Feathers aura had completely overshadowed him, suffocating him. Xian Zongfeng struck out with the 3-foot hidden blade in his hand, and a sword shadow whizzed out. Rumble! The two huge sword shadows clashed in the sky. Xian Zongfeng was clearly weaker. His body slightly trembled and was forced to retreat a few thousand meters. Damn it! Xian Zongfeng cursed. His body moved, and a pair of sword wings appeared on his back. He frantically tried to escape into the sky. He couldn't continue fighting, or he would definitely die in the hands of Wind Flame Thousand Feathers. Tried to escape? Seeing this, Wind Flame Thousand Feathers sneered and stabbed with his sword. Suddenly, sword shadows appeared in the sky and connected into a huge sword net, shrouding Xian Zongfeng. Xian Zongfeng felt the sword pressure coming from behind, and his face changed. He turned around and stabbed with his sword. Using the rebounding force of the sword aura, his speed became even faster. Seeing this, Wind Flame Thousand Feathers' face instantly turned gloomy. The sword intent on his body skyrocketed to the limit. The huge sword aura was like a raging wave, standing tall in the sky. He's going to attack with all his strength. Tian saw this scene from afar, and his eyes could not help but tremble. Although he was hundreds of thousands of meters away from Wind Flame Thousand Feathers, he could clearly feel the violent sword aura surrounding the latter. A legendary swordsman was indeed terrifying. Wind Flame Thousand Feathers could no longer catch up to Xian Zongfeng. He could only make his last attack. Burning sky with wind and fire. Fenghua Qinyu furiously roared. Immediately after, he violently swung his sword. Immediately, an endless amount of sword intent condensed in an instant. A huge sword shadow that was tens of thousands of meters long appeared in the sky. It was like a rainbow burning with blazing flames as it charged towards Xian Zongfeng. Xian Zongfeng was 10,000 meters away, but he could already feel the endless sword pressure. His face slightly changed, and the wings on his back flapped. Immediately, a layer of snow-white protective shield appeared on his body and suddenly activated, covering his entire body. Xian Zongfeng knew that if he could survive this attack, he would escape with his life. If he died, then everything would be over. Chapter 2026. Boom! Fenghua Qianyu's last strike pierced through the sky and pressed down on Xian Zongfeng. The huge sword shadow was like a fire dragon, rolling in the sky. It was as if the heaven and earth were burning. Boundless sword intent and flames filled the air, blazing and violent. Fenghua Qianyu used all his strength in this strike, determined to kill Xian Zongfeng. Strangely, Xian Zongfeng did not even look back as he continued to run without looking back. Tian noticed this, and his expression changed. He thought to himself, Xian Zongfeng is not fighting back. Is he scared out of his wits? In his opinion, if Xian Zongfeng turned around and attacked, he might have a chance to survive. However, he was just waiting for death if he kept running. It was impossible to resist Fenghua Qianyu's strike with his martial body. He's not scared out of his wits. He's just very confident in his defense. Fat Cat's voice was heard. Defense? What defense? Tian was stunned. He saw that there was a pure white halo around Xian Zongfeng's body. However, he was very confused. Could the seemingly thin halo really block Fenghua Qianyu's strike? Fenghua Qianyu was a legendary swordsman. One could imagine how powerful his strike was. Just when Tian was confused, the huge sword shadow in the sky suddenly descended and landed on Xian Zongfeng's body. At this moment, a strange scene happened. Rumble! The huge flaming sword shadow fell down and actually pierced through Xian Zongfeng's body. The huge sword shadow was torn apart by the light shield around Xian Zongfeng, and an ear-piercing sound was heard in the air. It's not that easy to kill me. Qian Zongfeng chuckled. With a flap of his wings, his figure disappeared into the horizon. This! From what Qian Yu watched Qian Zongfeng escape. His face froze and his mouth opened wide. After a long time, he roared, "Impossible! Impossible!" What happened just now was completely impossible in Fenghua Qian Yu's eyes. He was very confident in his sword will. One sword strike was enough to destroy a mountain range. However, even so, his strongest sword could not break through the thin layer of shield that Qian Zongfeng had condensed. It was too strange, and he could not accept it. From what Qian Yu wasn't the only one who couldn't believe it. The others were also stunned and only reacted after a dozen seconds. Am I seeing things? What just happened? What was the barrier around Sword Lord Wu's body? Why is he so strong? What kind of power is that? How could it possibly block Master Qian Yu's sword? It's too scary. What a strange halo barrier. Who is Sword Lord Wu? How can he have such power? The crowd discussed among themselves, their shocked eyes revealing the shock in their hearts at the moment. No one had expected that the final sword strike of the wind flame thousand feathers would actually have such an outcome. At this moment, Nie Dao was also astonished. He did not understand what was going on. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment before he finally reacted and asked, "Fat, what happened just now? What is the halo shield around Qian Zongfeng's body?" Just now, Fat Cat said that Qian Zongfeng was not scared out of his wits, but he was very confident in his defense. At this moment, Nie Tian finally understood how powerful Qian Zongfeng's halo shield was. However, he was completely unable to understand how that seemingly weak halo barrier could be this powerful to actually be able to block Firestorm Qian Yu's sword. If I'm not mistaken, that halo shield should be the legendary guardian of the elves. The fat cat's eyes narrowed as she said solemnly, "Elven guardian?" Nie Tian was stunned. He had no idea what Fat Cat was talking about. The fat cat nodded and explained, "The elven protection is an innate magical ability of the elves, and it will become stronger as they grow older." It was rumored that the elven protection was a protective power that came from the bloodline. It was very holy and was close to the holy power. However, the spirit protection can only be used once in a lifetime. After using it, the protective power within the spirit's body will disappear. Wait a second. Nie Tian interrupted Fat Cat and asked, "Fat, you said that the elven protection is an innate magical ability of the elves. Is Qian Zongfeng an elf?" According to Fat Cat, the elven protection could only be activated by the elves. However, Qian Zongfeng was clearly a human, so how could he use the elven protection? Yes. The Fat Cat nodded and said, "Since Qian Zongfeng can activate the elven protection, it proves that he is an elf. The reason why his appearance and aura are like that of a human might be because he used some kind of concealment method." This! Nie Tian was dumbfounded, and his face went blank. Qian Zongfeng was Sword Master Wu of the Shenwu Sword Pagoda. He must have experienced a lot to be able to reach this position today. Under such a complicated experience, he was able to hide his true identity. His patience and perseverance were absolutely terrifying. Who was Qian Zongfeng? What kind of secret was he hiding? Nie Tian couldn't help but take a deep breath. He had underestimated Qian Zongfeng all this time, thinking that the latter was only an ambitious swordsman. He didn't expect Qian Zongfeng's true identity to be an elf. It seemed that there must be a huge secret behind him. The elves had been wiped out by the Dragon Rebel clan in antiquity times. Most of the elves who had survived were slaves. Nie Tian had run into fairies back in the planar world, but he hadn't seen a single one in this realm. Humans had never allowed elves to exist. There were many experts in the territory, so it was almost impossible for elves to exist. One had to admit that Qian Zongfeng was indeed different. He had been able to hide in the human world for so long and become Sword Master Wu of the Shenwu Sword Pagoda. Qian Zongfeng must have had a purpose for hiding in the Shenwu Sword Pagoda, but now that he had escaped, it would be difficult to find out his purpose. From what Qian Yu was really unlucky. He had finally found the person who killed his father, but the latter had escaped. Damn it! The wind flame thousand feathers stood upright in midair and let out a furious roar. All the hair on its body stood on end, making it seem like an enraged lion. Just at that moment, Feng Qianyu seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly turned around and took a step forward. His figure arrived before the crowd. He looked at one person with a pair of cold eyes and coldly called out that person's name. Gongsun Shengji. Xian Zongfeng had escaped, but Gongsun Shengji was still here. Chapter 2027. Xian Zongfeng and Gongsun Shengji were Feng Qianyu's must-kill targets. In Feng Qianyu's opinion, Xian Zongfeng was the one who killed his father directly and Gongsun Shengji indirectly. Although Feng Qianyu had killed Xian Zongfeng, wouldn't Gongsun Shengji, who didn't know about it, be held responsible? Xian Zongfeng had been lurking in the Shenwu Sword Pagoda for a long time, but Gongsun Shengji hadn't discovered him. As the owner of the Divine Sword, he couldn't escape from his responsibility. If Gongsun Shengji had discovered Xian Zongfeng earlier, Feng Qianyu wouldn't have died. This was the reason why Feng Qianyu killed Gongsun Shengji. Gongsun Shengji, what else do you have to say? Feng Qianyu stared at Gongsun Shengji and said coldly. Gongsun Sheng's eyes trembled, his face stiff and embarrassed. With a pained expression, he said, I have nothing to say. Do it. Gongsun Shengji didn't explain anything because he felt that he was indeed responsible for this. It didn't matter if he knew or not. Feng Qianyu had died in the Shenwu Sword Pagoda, so Gongsun Shengji couldn't escape the blame. Gongsun Shengji couldn't fight anymore. He'd been injured by Jiang Lai and was in a bad state. In fact, even if he hadn't been injured by Jiang Lai, he wouldn't have been Feng Qianyu's match. Unless he didn't have the forbidden blood seal, he might have been able to fight Feng Qianyu. But now, there was only one path in front of him, and that was to wait for death. Gongsun Shengji, I respect you as a master of the sword. Do it yourself. Feng Qianyu calmed down a lot when he saw how calm Gongsun Shengji was, but he wouldn't let him go just because he was calm. He was willing to let Gongsun Shengji die in a dignified manner. That was the greatest mercy he could offer. Thank you. Gongsun Shengji nodded with a bitter smile. To think that he, the dignified divine sword master, who was once the #1 swordsman in the 9 regions, had actually fallen to the point of being forced to commit suicide. Wait! Just as Gongsun Shengji was about to kill himself with his sword intent, a voice rang out. In the next instant, the figure of Guiwu Kuangsha appeared beside Gongsun Shengji. Guiwu Kuangsha had always been by Nie Tian's side. At this moment, seeing that Gongsun Sheng was about to commit suicide, he naturally couldn't sit by and do nothing. Brother Guiwu. Seeing Guiwu Kuangsha, Gongsun Sheng couldn't help but smile bitterly and shake his head. He knew that Ghost Marshal Kuangsha and the Windfire Twin Cities were once good friends. However, he did not know the relationship between Ghost Marshal Kuangsha and the Windfire Thousand Feathers. Qianyu, your father's death has nothing to do with Swordmaster Gongsun. Why must you kill him? Guiwu Kuangsha looked at the wind-flame Qianyu with an agitated expression. The person before him was once his disciple. However, this disciple of his had already reached the pinnacle of the Sword Dao. He did not know how much weight his words still carried in the wind flame Qianyu's heart. Teacher, you're the one who raised me and taught me sword arts, leading me on the path of the Sword Dao. In the wind flame Qianyu's heart, your position is the same as my father's. Looking at Guiwu Kuangsha, Guiwu Kuangsha deeply bowed. His attitude was extremely respectful. I'm willing to do anything for you. Even if you want to take my life, I'm willing. The wind flame Qianyu's expression was solemn. Shortly after, he turned his gaze towards Gongsun Sheng and said, However, Gongsun Sheng is the one who caused my father's death. I can't let him continue to live. Guiwu Kuangsha's gaze slightly narrowed. He did not expect that the wind flame Qianyu would be so respectful towards him. However, at the same time, he also did not expect that the wind flame Qianyu would be so determined to kill Gongsun Sheng. Gongsun Sheng was stunned for a moment. He did not expect that the wind flame Qianyu and the wind flame Qianyu would actually have a master-disciple relationship. However, even if that was the case, the pleading of the wind flame Qian Yu was useless. Guiwu Guangsha sighed and did not say anything else. He had already tried his best. After all, he could not force the wind flame Qian Yu to let Gongsun Sheng off. Wait! However, at this moment, another voice rang out. Shortly after, Nie Tian's figure walked over. Nie Dao stood behind Nie Tian and walked over. However, he looked at Gongsun Sheng with a somewhat strange gaze. After all, the relationship between the two of them was still stiff. The wind flame, Qian Yu's gaze slightly narrowed. He looked at Nie Tian and said cold. Nie Tian, what do you want to say? Previously, the wind flame Qian Yu had secretly paid attention to the battle royale of the quarterfinals. He noticed that Nie Tian had the opportunity to kill the wind flame Ice Great, but he gave the latter a chance to live. This was also the reason why he was willing to let Nie Tian speak. Lord Wind Flame, Lord Divine Sword Master is not the person who killed your father. You only want to kill him to vent the anger in your heart. You have to think carefully. Is it really worth it to do this? Nie Tian looked at the wind flame Qian Yu and said solemnly, whether it is worth it or not, this is my own business. It has nothing to do with others. The wind flame Qian Yu's expression clearly stiffened. Shortly after, he looked coldly at Nie Tian and said, Nie Tian, this matter has nothing to do with you. I advise you not to meddle in other people's business. The wind flame Qian Yu was very grateful that Nie Tian did not kill the wind flame Ice Great. However, this did not mean that he would listen to Nie Tian's words. He was definitely going to kill Gongsun Sheng today. No one could stop him. Since Brother Gongsun is not the person who killed your father, you still want to force him to commit suicide. Isn't this killing the innocent? At this moment, Nie Dao, who was at the side, finally spoke. He looked at the wind flame Qian Yu with a gloomy expression. Among everyone present, the only one who had the ability to stop the wind flame Qian Yu was Nie Dao. Wind and Cloud Alliance Master, could it be that you also want to meddle in other people's business? The wind flame Qian Yu was not afraid at all. He looked at Nie Dao cold. His gaze was extremely stern, as if saying, if you meddle in other people's business, I don't mind fighting with you. At this moment, Gongsun Sheng's expression changed slightly. He looked at Nie Dao and wanted to say something. However, he did not say anything. He and Nie Dao were once good friends. However, the two of them had a falling out because of the matter between Ye Fenghua and Third Lady Gongsun. Since then, they had never met each other. He did not expect that Nie Dao would stand out and speak for him at this moment. After so many years, Gongsun Sheng no longer cared about what happened in the past. However, he did not have a suitable opportunity to meet Nie Dao. Now that the two of them met, it was an opportunity to break the ice. Nie Dao turned to look at Gongsun Sheng and smiled. Then, he said to the wind flame Qian Yu, Brother Gongsun is my friend. How can I watch him be forced to kill himself? The wind flame Qian Yu's expression changed instantly. He immediately became cold and said in a deep voice, Wind and Cloud Alliance Master, it seems that you really want to interfere in this matter. So what if I interfere? Nie Dao also became tough at this moment. He said in a cold voice, Since I, Nie Dao, am here today, no one can kill Gongsun Sheng. Is that so? The wind flame Qian Yu's eyes were as deep as water. He stared at Nie Dao and said coldly, It seems that I will have to experience the Wind and Cloud Alliance Master's strength today. The wind flame Qian Yu was not afraid of Nie Dao at all. Today, no one could stop him from killing Gongsun Sheng. Not even the Wind and Cloud Alliance Master. Chapter 2028. High up in the sky, Nie Dao and Firestorm Thousand Feathers were at each other's throats. The atmosphere instantly became tense. Nie Tian looked embarrassed. He didn't expect things to turn out this way. He wasn't worried about Nie Dao's safety. In his opinion, although Firestorm Thousand Feathers was strong, he couldn't hurt Nie Dao. On the contrary, if Firestorm Thousand Feathers were to fight Nie Dao to the death, the latter might hurt him if he was enraged. However, Firestorm Thousand Feathers was bent on killing Gongsun Sheng. No one could stop him. The battle before him was unavoidable. Divine Sword Master, let's retreat. Nie Tian nodded and retreated with Gongsun Sheng and the others. The eyes of the onlookers became heated at this moment. The leader of Fengyun Alliance and Xingtian Alliance didn't fight, but the leader of Fengyun Alliance and Tower Leader Thousand Feathers were going to fight. Everyone retreated 10,000 meters away from the two in the sky. Make your move. High up in the sky, Nie Dao looked at Firestorm Thousand Feathers and said coldly, "All right, Feng Wuqian, you didn't hold back." With a low roar, the sword aura around him soared like a mountain in an ocean. Instantly, the space was pulled taut by the sword intent. Without the slightest hesitation, he slashed out with his sword, and an enormous sword image charged towards Nie Dao. Nie Tian's lips curled up. His face was very calm. He struck with his palm. A terrifying palm shadow appeared like a mountain. Rumble! In the next moment, the palm and sword collided. The void shook violently. Boundless power exploded and spread in all directions, wreaking havoc in the space. Firestorm Thousand Feathers' figure moved slightly and was forced to take a few steps back. On the other hand, Nie Dao was as steady as Mount Tai. He didn't move at all. This was the first time they fought. It was obvious that Firestorm Thousand Feathers' strength was slightly weaker than Nie Dao's. Nie Dao smiled and said loudly, "The legendary swordsman is only SOSO." Although he said so, Nie Dao was very surprised. Although the sword strike just now did not injure him, it made him feel threatened. Fortunately, he was a god-restraining fetus, so his martial body was far stronger than that of a martial artist of the same level. Otherwise, he would have been injured by that sword. A legendary swordsman was, after all, very strong. If the Wind Fire Thousand Feathers was also a cultivator with a strong bloodline, the one who would be retreating would be Nie Dao. When the crowd saw this, their expressions changed slightly, and they could not help but discuss. The Wind and Cloud Alliance Master is indeed someone who stands at the pinnacle of the 9 regions. His strength is stronger than Tower Master Chinyu's. That might not be the case. Master Thousand Feather has already exhausted a lot of his energy in his fight against Swordmaster Wu. It's already not easy for him to fight against Alliance Master Wind and Cloud. The battle has only just begun. It's still hard to say who will win and who will lose. There were people in the crowd who believed that Nie Dao was stronger, but there were also people who felt that the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers still had a chance of winning. Arrogant. When the Fenghua Qianyu heard Nie Dao's provocative words, his face couldn't help but change. The sword aura on his body actually rose explosively once again, and then he fiercely slashed down. This sword's aura was even fiercer and sharper than the previous one. It seemed that the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers was really angry. He originally did not want to be enemies with Nie Dao, but at this moment, in order to kill Gongsun Xingji, he could only go all out. Nie Dao stood in the void, facing the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers attack. He similarly slapped out with his palm, but the difference was that his palm contained the power of the spirit confining fetus. Rumble. In the void, the palm shadow and the sword shadow collided, and a loud explosion erupted. An even more terrifying airwave was released, and the space was surging. The crowd felt the terrifying aura, and they all retreated. And in the sky, the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers figure was forced to retreat again. As for Nie Dao, he was still like an old tree and did not move an inch. Damn it! Seeing this, the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers suddenly roared and immediately released an even more violent sword aura and slashed at Nie Dao one after another. But unfortunately, Nie Dao was like a giant, standing there, and no matter how violent the storm was, he did not move. The Wind Flame Thousand Feathers consecutively attacked more than a dozen times, but he could not move Nie Dao, and this caused him to become irritable. The crowd looked at the scene in the sky, and their eyes could not help but tremble. No one thought that Nie Dao's martial arts foundation would be so deep. Just this terrifying defense alone was enough to let him stand at the peak. I didn't expect Grandpa to be so powerful. The spirit confining fetus is indeed terrifying. Nie Tian watched from afar, and he could not help but exclaim in his heart. He naturally knew that the reason why Nie Dao was so powerful was because of the spirit confining fetus. You call this terrifying? At the same time, the fat cat's voice was heard, but with a hint of disdain. Your fiend god nascent fetus is much more terrifying than the spirit confining fetus. You just don't know it yourself. Is that so? Nyetian could not help but ask, and he laughed. Of course. The fat cat let out a strange cry, and then did not say anything else. A few days ago, when Nyetian lost control, the power of 9,000 fiend gods had all awakened. Even Gongsun Xingji was not his opponent. It had to be mentioned that Nyetian was only an early overgod at that time. And the fat cat knew that the fiend god nascent fetus did not just contain the power of 9,000 fiend gods. There was an even more terrifying power that had yet to awaken. The fiend god nascent fetus was known as the greatest ancient taboo. No one knew just how terrifying it was. Guiwu Guangsha was rather nervous. He was very worried that Niet Dao would injure the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers. Wind Flame Thousand Feathers, if this is all you have, it's impossible for you to defeat I. At this moment, Niet Dao's voice rang out in the sky. It seemed extremely domineering. Really? The Wind Flame Thousand Feathers' eyes narrowed slightly. He could tell that Niet Dao's martial body was just too powerful. Combined with the power of the spirit confining fetus, he would not be able to injure Niet Dao even if he struck out 100 times. Wind and Cloud Alliance Master, since you insist on saving Gongsun Xingji, prepare to pay the price. Suddenly, the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers expression changed. He suddenly released a very strange aura. His body surged with a scarlet sword intent. The space was actually filled with a bloody smell. Nyetian noticed that the aura of the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers was not right. His expression changed. Oh no, he's going to use the power of the blood-weeping sword infant. At the same time, the fat cat cried out. His face was actually a little frightened. The Wind Flame Thousand Feathers was really going all out this time. Once he used the power of the blood-weeping sword infant, even if he could heavily injure Nye Dao, he would become extremely weak. When he was fighting against Xian Zongfeng, the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers did not use the blood-weeping sword infant. At this moment, he was really going all out. Nyetian's brows furrowed. He immediately sensed that the aura of the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers was several times stronger than before. What a powerful aura! The crowd also felt the change of the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers aura and could not help but cry out. Is he going all out? Nye Dao was the closest to the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers. Of course, he could feel the change of the latter's aura. He could not help but frown, and his face became serious. He only wanted to stop the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers from killing Gongsun Xingji. He did not want to fight to the death with his opponent. However, looking at the current posture of the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers, he was forcing Nye Dao to go all out. Since it's like this, then don't blame I. Nye Dao's face sank. Immediately after, his body slightly shook. Circles of golden halos were released from his body. It was extremely dazzling in the space. Chapter 2029. In order to kill Gongsun Xingji, the Fenghua Thousand Feather decided to risk everything. He decided to use the power of the Blood Tier Sword Infant. His actions also forced Niet Dao into a situation where he had to fight with his full strength. In the sky, the presences of the Fenghua Thousand Feather and Nye Dao skyrocketed. The two of them were like two huge whirlpools in the ocean, churning and surging wildly. They were only waiting for the next moment to collide. It would be an extremely horrifying sight. The eyes of the crowd constantly trembled. They did not blink at all. No one wanted to miss the most interesting scene. One was the leader of the Wind and Cloud Alliance, while the other was the leader of the Thousand Feather Pavilion. One was an expert at the peak of the way of the martial, while the other was a swordsman at the peak of the way of the sword. It was rare to see such a frightening scene of two people fighting with their lives on the line. Oh no! Nyetian's heart suddenly sank when he saw this from afar. His expression changed drastically. He knew that the Fenghua Thousand Feather and Nye Dao would fight with their lives on the line in the next moment, but this was something he did not want to see the most. Niet Dao was his grandfather. He obviously did not want him to be injured. As for the Fenghua Thousand Feather, he did not seem to be an evil person based on what he had done after appearing. Niet Tian did not want to see either Niet Dao or the Fenghua Thousand Feather injured. And judging from Fat Cat's reaction, Niet Tian was unsure just how powerful the Fenghua Thousand Feather would be after activating the Blood Tier Sword Infant. Gong Sun Xingji and Guiwu Kuangsha were extremely embarrassed as well. They were extremely nervous. They knew that a horrifying scene was about to happen, so their hearts were in their throats. Niet Tian, think of a way to stop them. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice rang out. She was extremely anxious. Niet Tian was stunned. His eyes could not help but tremble. Of course, he wanted to stop them, but he did not have the strength to do so. Whether it was Niet Dao or the Fenghua Thousand Feather, they were both peak experts. Any one of them could kill him instantly. How could he, an overgod, stop them? Fat, is the Blood Tier Sword Infant really that terrifying? Niet Tian asked suddenly. His voice even trembled. Very scary. Fat Cat's voice was equally nervous as she said, if the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers were to fight to the death with your grandfather, the most likely outcome would be the two of them perishing together. Mutual destruction? Niet Tian was taken aback, and beads of sweat instantly appeared on his forehead. His entire face froze. Mutual destruction. This result was too terrifying. This was a terrible result that Niet Tian didn't even dare to think about. No, we must stop them. In an instant, Niet Tian roared in his heart. Shortly after, his figure moved and the three forbidden arts were unleashed once again. He was like an arrow that had left the bow as he flew towards Niet Dao and the Wind Flame Thousand Plume. At the same time, he shouted with all his might, Alliance Master, Thousand Plume Pavilion Master, please stop. Niet Tian, Gong Sun Shengji, and Guiwu Kuangsha's faces were originally filled with endless worry. Suddenly, they saw a figure rushing over. After gawking for a moment, they saw clearly that it was Niet Tian, causing their faces to change. Both of them cried out in their hearts at the same time. Niet Tian, does he want to die? Niet Dao and the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers were about to use their ultimate moves, but Niet Tian rushed over at this time. Wasn't he just courting death? Not to mention that Niet Tian was courting death. Even a peak paramount god like Guiwu Kuangsha would most likely die if he rushed over at this time. Niet Tian, Niet Dao's entire body's aura rose to the extreme. He was ready to fight the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers head on. However, when he suddenly heard Niet Tian's voice, he turned to look, and his face instantly sank. He also didn't expect that Niet Tian would actually rush over as if his life depended on it. Alliance Master, you're distracted. Wind Flame Thousand Feathers' eyes slightly trembled. He suddenly let out a low roar, and immediately the sword aura around him rose to the extreme. The long sword in his hand directly slashed down. Originally, Wind Flame Thousand Feathers didn't want to take advantage of the situation. This kind of action when the opponent was distracted was also something he despised. However, he really wanted to kill Gong Sun Sheng. Therefore, even if he had to do something despicable at this moment, he wouldn't hesitate. Damn it! Niet Dao suddenly felt an incomparably powerful sword pressure coming towards him. His gloomy expression instantly changed. He let out a low roar, and the golden light around his body crazily surged, condensing into a golden shield, covering him in the void. Originally, Niet Dao wanted to fight the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers head-on. However, with the appearance of Niet Tian, he had to passively defend. Otherwise, if the two of them clashed, the waves of energy generated would be something that Niet Tian wouldn't be able to withstand. At the same time that Niet Dao activated the God-binding shield, he turned around and struck out with his palm. A continuous wave of energy pierced through the air and actually bombarded towards Niet Tian. Of course, he didn't want to hurt Niet Tian. Instead, he wanted to prevent Niet Tian from approaching and let Niet Tian get as far away from the center of the collision as possible. Niet Tian was in midair and suddenly felt a spring wind and rain. A soft and boundless energy appeared, making it impossible for him to approach. Instead, he could only quickly retreat. He suddenly thought of something, and his expression instantly changed. In order to save Nie Tian, Nie Dao gave up on attacking and chose to passively defend. This was extremely disadvantageous to him. If the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers sword were to land, Nie Dao definitely wouldn't be able to withstand it. When he thought of this, Nie Tian's eyes suddenly trembled, and his expression was incomparably shocked. Just now, he was too impulsive and directly rushed over. Nie Dao cared a lot about him, but the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers couldn't possibly care about his life. The eyes of the crowd suddenly trembled at this moment. No one had expected such a dramatic scene to occur in the battle. However, right at that moment, another variable occurred. Wind Flame Thousand Feathers stop. Right when the Firestorm Thousand Feathers sword was about to descend, a clear and impatient voice resounded out. After that, a figure appeared in the sky like a bolt of lightning, swift to the limit, and actually appeared between Nie Dao and the Firestorm Thousand Feathers. So fast, the sudden scene caused Nie Tian's expression to change, and he exclaimed in his heart. However, when he saw the figure that suddenly appeared, his expression became strange, and he said in astonishment, "Third Lady Gong's son?" Nie Tian had never expected that the person who had suddenly appeared would be Third Lady Gong's son. Third Lady Gong's son. Why would she appear at this time? Girl! At this moment, the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers also saw Third Lady Gongsuan's face clearly and was also startled. His eyes suddenly trembled, and his expression was extremely shocked as he shouted out an unexpected name. Girl, the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers actually called Third Lady Gongsun a girl. It was obvious that the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers and Third Lady Gongsun knew each other, and their relationship was not ordinary. Quick dodge. In the next instant, the Wind Flame Thousand Feathers suddenly reacted, and his aura immediately weakened. He let out a strange cry, and his expression became terrified. He never expected Third Lady Gongsun to appear at this time. If his sword were to land, Third Lady Gongsun would definitely be killed on the spot. Unfortunately, it was too late for him to withdraw his sword. At most, he would directly weaken the force of the sword. Chapter 2030. Nie Dao's gaze suddenly trembled. How could he have imagined that Third Lady Gongsun would actually appear at this moment? In an instant, Nie Dao's body shook without hesitation. Golden light gushed out from his body. The god-restraining shield turned into endless light that surged towards Third Lady Gongsun and instantly enveloped her. It was also at this moment that the Firestorm Thousand Feathers sword descended with a loud bang. Rumble! The enormous sword shadow bombarded the golden light shield. A loud explosion sounded in the air. Heaven and earth trembled along with it. The entire sky was filled with extremely violent power. Boom! Crack, crack, crack. Almost at the same time, the sword shadow and the light shield in the air started to crumble. Waves of qi spread out and filled the air. Nie Tian saw from afar that the air was filled with terrifying qi waves. He actually couldn't see anything. Nie Dao, the Firestorm Thousand Feathers, and Third Lady Gongsuan's figures were engulfed by the terrifying qi waves. When the crowd saw this scene, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Their eyes trembled uncontrollably. No one would have thought that such a shocking battle would actually have such a huge change. Girl! Just at this moment, a sword aura suddenly appeared, forcibly sweeping away the waves of qi in the air. The Wind Flame Thousand Feathers recklessly rushed towards Third Lady Gongsun. His entire person seemed to have gone mad, his expression one of extreme agony. Nie Dao frowned. His body trembled slightly. Golden light gushed out from his body and dispersed all the qi waves in the air. When he saw the Firestorm Thousand Feathers suddenly rushing towards Third Lady Gongsun, he couldn't help but be enraged. He angrily roared, "Bastard, get out of my way!" As he roared, Nie Dao struck out with his palm. A vast and mighty palm shadow suddenly rumbled down towards the Firestorm Thousand Feathers. However, at this moment, the firestorm Thousand Feathers was like an idiot. He didn't put up any defense and only rushed towards Third Lady Gongsun. Bang! With a muffled sound, the firestorm Thousand Feathers figure was directly sent flying. He was forced to retreat for thousands of meters. However, after he stabilized his figure, his eyes were as red as blood. Then, a pair of sword wings appeared on his back, and he unexpectedly rushed towards Third Lady Gongsun again. At this moment, Third Lady Gongsun was unconscious. Her body was covered in blood, and her aura was extremely weak. She was like a withered leaf in the wind, on the verge of shattering at any moment. Niet Dao and the wind flame Thousand Feathers were naturally able to withstand that level of impact, but Third Lady Gongsun was unable to. Courting death, Niet Dao couldn't help but let out a low roar when he saw that the wind flame Thousand Feathers actually still dared to approach Third Lady Gongsun, and his eyes revealed killing intent. His aura rose violently, and he actually intended to annihilate the wind flame Thousand Feathers with a single palm strike. However, at that moment, Niet Tian's voice resounded in Niet Dao's mind. It was Niet Tian's voice. "Grandpa, don't kill him." Niet Dao was stunned for a moment, but he still stopped. Last, Feng Wuqianyu's figure was extremely fast, and he directly arrived at Third Lady Gongsun's side. Looking at the latter, who was already covered in blood, he actually burst into tears. Seeing this, Niet Dao was stunned. He had no idea what was going on. Tower Master Thousand Feathers, the #1 swordsman in the 9 major realms, actually burst into tears like a child in front of so many people. This was too strange. What is going on? Seeing this scene, the crowd was even more baffled. Was Feng Wuqianyu crazy? Clearly, Feng Wuqianyu wasn't injured. So why did he suddenly burst into tears at this moment, and in front of so many people? Gongsun Shengji and Guiwu Quangsha's figures also rushed over at this moment, and seeing the scene in front of them, they were also stunned. They didn't even know that Feng Wuqianyu and Third Lady Gongsun knew each other, so they had no idea what was going on. Only Niet Tian frowned, and he had already guessed everything in his heart. Previously, when Third Lady Gongsun suddenly appeared, Niet Tian noticed that Feng Wuqianyu's expression had completely changed. That gaze, that reaction, and that address of lass all indicated one thing. Feng Wuqianyu and Third Lady Gongsun were a pair of lovers. At this moment, Niet Tian understood everything. Back then, Third Lady Gongsun had an engagement with Niet Tian's father, Nie Fenghua, but Nie Fenghua left on the day of the wedding. Nie Fenghua left not because of anything else, but because Third Lady Gongsun had someone she loved, but it wasn't him. Perhaps Nie Fenghua's feelings for Third Lady Gongsun were like siblings, so he chose to leave. Third Lady Gongsun told Nie Tian everything, but she didn't say who the person she loved was. But now, Nie Tian knew that the person Third Lady Gongsun loved was none other than Master Qianyu, Feng Wuqianyu. Nie Tian had wondered what kind of person Third Lady Gongsun had told him about Nie Fenghua, and what kind of person would make Third Lady Gongsun leave. With Nie Fenghua's talent, he wasn't an ordinary person, and he wouldn't lose to anyone. But Nie Tian would never have thought that the person who was in love with Third Lady Gongsun was actually Feng Wuqianyu. But now that he thought about it, everything made sense. Third Lady Gongsun would rather let Nie Fenghua bear the crime of running away from the wedding than say Feng Wuqianyu's name. She must have known about the grudge between Feng Wuqianyu and the Shenwu Sword Pagoda. Once Feng Wuqianyu's name was revealed, it would cause Qianyu Tower and the Shenwu Sword Pagoda to fight to the death. Feng Wuqianyu used to be a member of the Shenwu Sword Pagoda, so it wasn't strange that he knew Third Lady Gongsun. But judging from how Feng Wuqianyu addressed Third Lady Gongsun, he didn't know her real identity. "Girl, wake up, wake up!" At this moment, Feng Wuqianyu hugged Third Lady Gongsun in his arms and cried like a child. But Third Lady Gongsun's aura was weakening bit by bit, about to disappear at any moment. "Feng Wuqianyu, let go of my daughter!" Gongsun Sheng came to his senses and stepped forward, shouting. Feng Wuqianyu raised his head in shock. He really didn't know Third Lady Gongsun's real identity. "Master Qianyu, Let me take a look. Nie Tian arrived. Now wasn't the time to explain. Saving third Lady Gongsun was more important. Feng Wuqianyu looked at Nie Tian and was stunned. Feng Wuqianyu, if you don't want her to die, then get out of the way, Nie Tian said. Feng Wuqianyu stood up and let go of third Lady Gongsun. Nie Tian came to third Lady Gongsun and used his divine sense to check. Her aura was very weak and could disappear at any moment. Oh no! Nie Tian's face was gloomy. He released the power of the Terra Source and poured it into third Lady Gongsun's body. But after absorbing the power of the Terra Source, third Lady Gongsun's condition didn't improve. Her aura was still very weak. After several battles, Nie Tian didn't have much power of the Terra Source left in his body. Plus, his Terra Source was only life energy and couldn't bring the dead back to life. Third Lady Gongsun's injuries were too serious. Even the Terra Source couldn't help her recover. Chapter 2031. Nie Tian, how is Sanyang? Gongsun Sheng saw that Nie Tian's face was getting paler and paler, and his face became gloomy. Tears welled up in his eyes and finally fell. He only had this one daughter, and she was the person he cared about the most in his life. Yet, he had to watch her die right in front of his eyes. The pain in his heart was unimaginable. Nie Tian's face became paler and paler, but he did not give up. He continued to overdraft the Terra Source in his body. Nie Tian, give up. With your current strength, you can't save her. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice was heard, and his face became very gloomy. Nie Tian's expression flickered, and his tense nerves immediately relaxed. He really did not want to give up, but his current strength was limited, and he could not save third Lady Gongsun's life. Feng Wuqianyu, you bastard, you killed my daughter. Seeing that Nie Tian had suddenly stopped, Gongsun Sheng seemed to have gone mad. He rushed to Feng Wuqianyu, stretched out his palm, and slapped the latter's face. At this moment, Feng Wuqianyu was like a walking corpse. He allowed Gongsun Sheng to slap his face again and again, but he did not retaliate at all. He had killed the person he loved with his own hands. His heart was in more pain than Gongsun Sheng's. Feng Wuqianyu seemed to have lost all his faith. He stood there in a daze and did not react at all. At this moment, to him, revenge, pursuit of martial arts, and grudges were all meaningless. If he could save third Lady Gongsun's life, he was willing to pay any price. At this moment, the regret in his heart was like an uncontrollable river, bursting its banks. Unfortunately, third Lady Gongsun could not wake up. Her aura was weakening, and her life was quietly slipping away. Fat, is there really no other way? Nie Tian asked with a sorrowful expression. There's no other way. The Terra Source in your body is too weak, and her life is slipping away too much. You can't save her. Fat Cat replied to Nie Tian, and his expression was gloomy. The atmosphere suddenly became oppressive and oppressive. Who would have thought that the final outcome would be like this? Nie Tian. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out. Soon after, a figure appeared in front of everyone. Lord Earth Chief. Nie Tian abruptly raised his head. Seeing Earth Chief and Cher appear, he couldn't help but sigh and directly said, I have some matters to attend to right now. Let's talk about our matters later. Previously, Earth Chief had told Nie Tian that after the Evil Edge sword duel, he would personally look for Nie Tian to discuss Cher. Nie Tian was supposed to deal with Cher after the Evil Edge sword meet, but he couldn't just walk away now. Nie Tian, do you want to save her? Earth Chief did not leave. Instead, he smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth curling up slightly. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment and looked at Earth Chief with a strange expression. You can save her. Gongsun Sheng and Feng Wuqianyu reacted at the same time. They immediately looked at Earth Chief with blazing eyes. Yes. Earth Chief smiled faintly and gave a definite answer. Lord Earth Chief, please save her. Gongsun Sheng and Feng Wuqianyu spoke at the same time. Their originally murky eyes were filled with anticipation. If Earth Chief could save third Lady Gongsun, Gongsun Sheng and Feng Wuqianyu were willing to pay any price. However, Earth Chief smiled faintly and didn't care about the two. Instead, he turned his gaze to Nie Tian and said, Nie Tian, I want to make a deal with you. A deal? Nie Tian was stunned and asked, What deal? Earth Chief smiled faintly and said, I'll help you save someone, and you'll do something for me. What is it? Nie Tian was stunned again and asked. Earth Chief suddenly looked at Cher and said in a deep voice, Help Her Highness recover her memories. Hearing Earth Chief's words, Nie Tian's eyes couldn't help but tighten with a surprised expression. He originally thought that the inescapable net sealed Cher's memories and wanted to ask Earth Chief how to help Cher recover her memories. He didn't expect that the latter was also trying to recover Cher's memories. Nie Tian was very curious. How could he recover Cher's memories with his ability? Nie Tian, don't be surprised. I will explain some things to you. What you need to do now is to answer me. Are you willing to do this deal? Earth Chief guessed Nie Tian's doubts and said with a faint smile, All right, I agree. Nie Tian didn't hesitate and immediately nodded in agreement. Very well. Earth Chief smiled faintly and looked at Gongsun Sheng and Feng Qianyu, saying, Sir Lord Gongsun, there are too many people here. Let's return to Shenwu City first. All right. Gongsun Sheng came back to his senses and nodded heavily. He turned around and carried Third Lady Gongsun in his arms, heading straight for Shenwu City. Everyone followed him. A moment later, they arrived at a small courtyard in the Shenwu City Lord's mansion. Lord Earth Chief, what should we do now? Gongsun Sheng put Third Lady Gongsun on the bed in the room and asked Earth Chief anxiously. All of you can leave the small courtyard. Without my order, no one is allowed to approach this small courtyard. Earth Chief smiled faintly and said calmly, This. Gongsun Sheng and Fenghua Qianyu were both stunned and a little worried. She's already in such a state. Are you still worried that I will harm her? Earth Chief smiled faintly and said half-jokingly, Lord Divine Sword Lord, Lord Tower Lord, let's go out first. Nie Tian nodded slightly and signaled everyone to leave. He knew that Earth Chief was from the ancient Ming clan and must have an unusual way to save people. He just didn't want others to see it. Everyone left the room and went outside the small courtyard. As soon as they arrived at the small courtyard, Gongsun Sheng angrily asked Fenghua Qianyu, What is going on? Fenghua Qianyu frowned. His mind was also in a daze. He didn't know what was going on. Why did the person he loved become Gongsun Sheng's daughter? After thinking for a while, Fenghua Qianyu finally said it. When he was in the Shenwu Sword Pagoda, he accidentally met Third Lady Gongsun, but he didn't know her real identity and only called her a girl. One day, he was ready to leave the Shenwu Sword Pagoda and wanted to take Third Lady Gongsun with him, but she refused. After crying and begging, he had no choice but to leave alone. But not long after, a man came to him with a baby. He told him that this was the child of him and Third Lady Gongsun. He also told him that Third Lady Gongsun had a difficult labor and passed away while giving birth. Fenghua Qianyu believed that person and accepted the child. He never went to see Third Lady Gongsun again. He never thought that he would see Third Lady Gongsun again today. What he regretted the most was the fact that he had personally killed Third Lady Gongsun. Chapter 2032. Gongsun Sheng couldn't accept that Fenghua Qianyu and Third Lady Gongsun had a child. He even doubted Fenghua Qianyu's words, because he had always thought that his daughter was innocent. Apart from a failed engagement, there was nothing else. However, he couldn't accept what had just happened. It's true, Fenghua Qianyu nodded solemnly. At this moment, Fenghua Binghong was beside him. He pointed at the latter and said, This is my son with the little girl. Gongsun Sheng was stunned. When he looked at Fenghua Qianyu, his expression froze. How powerful was he? Naturally, he could sense this bloodline connection in an instant. The young swordsman in front of him, Fenghua Qianyu, was indeed related to him by blood. Gongsun Sheng had seen Fenghua Qianyu before, but he had only seen them from a distance of tens of thousands of meters. He didn't try to sense them, so he naturally didn't notice the blood relationship. Now that he was looking at Fenghua Qianyu, the blood relationship was even more vivid and intense. Nie Tian was also stunned. He only knew that Third Lady Gongsun and Fenghua Qianyu were lovers, but he didn't know that they had a child together. The reason why Gongsun Sheng didn't know about this was that Third Lady Gongsun had secretly given birth to the child under the pretext of cultivating in seclusion. Then, she sent the child to Fenghua Qianyu. After all, it was normal for warriors to cultivate in seclusion. It was common for warriors to cultivate in seclusion for hundreds or even thousands of years. If Third Lady Gongsun wanted to hide it, it would be difficult for Gongsun Sheng to find out. Nie Dao's expression was also very awkward at this moment. He had never thought that the truth of the matter would be like this. Although the engagement between Nie Fenghua and Third Lady Gongsun had been broken, Third Lady Gongsun was Nie Fenghua's fiancée. This kind of thing was not a glorious thing for Nie Fenghua or the Nie family. At this moment, Nie Tian saw through Nie Dao's thoughts, so he didn't stay silent anymore and said, "Grandpa, actually, Father already knew about Third Lady Gongsun. He chose to leave during the wedding, and he chose to take all the blame himself." Nie Dao was stunned once again, and his face stiffened once more. Gongsun Sheng was also stunned. No matter how stupid he was, he understood that Nie Fenghua had run away from the marriage. It was not Nie Fenghua who had wronged Third Lady Gongsun, but Third Lady Gongsun who had wronged Nie Fenghua. In other words, it wasn't the Nie clan's fault, but the Gongsun clan's. Another thing that shocked him was that Nie Tian actually directly called Nie Dao grandpa, and also called Nie Fenghua father. In fact, he had long been aware of Nie Tian's identity. Back then, he already knew that Nie Tian was a god-fiend nascent embryo. However, when Nie Tian said it himself, he was still surprised. "Brother Nie?" Gongsun Sheng frowned. He suddenly took a step forward and knelt in front of Nie Dao. He said in a deep voice, "I was wrong about what happened back then." Seeing this, Fenghua Qianyu also suddenly knelt down. This kneel was not only for his wrongdoings, but also for Nie Dao's sacrifice of his own life to save Third Lady Gongsun's. If it wasn't for Nie Dao, Third Lady Gongsun would have been killed by Fenghua Qianyu. "What are you two doing? Quickly get up." Nie Dao was stunned for a moment, but he immediately reacted and pulled Gongsun Sheng and Fenghua Qianyu up. It had already happened for so long. What else could he say? Moreover, the Nie clan and the Gongsun clan had been enemies for so long. Now that the misunderstanding had been resolved, was he going to continue to hate Gongsun Sheng and continue the situation? "Brother Gongsun, it's all in the past. We were friends before, and we will still be friends in the future." Nie Dao smiled faintly and patted Gongsun Sheng's shoulder. "Brother Nie." Gongsun Sheng was so emotional that tears streamed down his face. He was already speechless. Seeing this, the corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled up into a faint smile, feeling very gratified. Two old friends who had known each other for hundreds of thousands of years could finally bury the hatchet. How could he not be happy? Actually, Nie Tian felt that Nie Fenghua had left back then because of his sibling relationship with Third Lady Gongsun. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given up. Although Nie Tian had never met his father, he had heard some things from the Holy Mother of Jiuying. Therefore, he firmly believed that Nie Fenghua wasn't the kind of person who would give up so easily. Now that everyone had spoken up, the atmosphere was no longer so oppressive. "Everyone, Nie Tian's identity is very special. I hope everyone can keep this a secret." At this moment, Nie Dao looked around at the crowd and said loudly, "Of course." Everyone nodded and agreed. Although many people already knew Nie Tian's identity, it was better not to make it public. Everyone present was trustworthy. The secret of Nie Tian's god-fiend, nascent embryo, had to be kept a secret. After a moment, Earth Chief finally walked out of the room. He looked a little tired, but a faint smile hung at the corner of his mouth. "Lord Earth Chief, how is Third Lady?" Gongsun Sheng stepped forward and asked somewhat anxiously. Earth Chief nodded with a smile and said, "She's awake. You can go in and see her." "Many thanks." Gongsun Sheng thanked him and directly entered the room. Fenghua Qianyu and Fenghua Binghong followed him into the room. Nie Tian smiled faintly. They were reuniting with their family, so of course he wouldn't join in on the fun. It had to be said that Earth Chief, a member of the ancient Ming clan, had some tricks up his sleeve. Third Lady Gongsun had been seriously injured, but he had still been able to bring her back to life. Earth Chief came to Nyetion's side and said with a smile, "Nyetion, I've saved her. It's time to talk about our matters." "Sure." Nyetion nodded in agreement. Nyetion. Niedao stepped forward and wanted to say something, but Nyetion reached out and stopped him. Nyetion looked at Niedao and said, "Grandfather, trust me. I can handle this." "Alliance leader Nye, this is a deal between me and Nyetion. You don't have to interfere." Earth Chief laughed and said in a playful tone. Nyetion thought for a moment and finally nodded. He knew that Nyetion had his own path to walk, and as the Alliance leader, he had his own responsibilities. He couldn't be by Nyetion's side all the time, so some things were better left to Nyetion. "Nyetion, let's find a quiet place," Earth Chieftain said with a faint smile. Then he blurred into motion and left. Chapter 2033. A while later, Earth Chief, Nyetion, and Cher arrived at a remote location. Earth Chief scanned the surroundings and confirmed that there was no one else around. He smiled faintly and said, "There's no one else here, so this is a good place to talk." Nyetion didn't beat around the bush and said, "Lord Earth Chief, what do you want? Just say it." "Okay." Earth Chieftain nodded and said, "Nyetion, I bet you're wondering why the Crown Princess's memories were suddenly sealed. This matter is very complicated, and it is a secret of our ancient Ming race, so I cannot tell you. What I can tell you is that the princess memories being sealed is something we do not wish to see. The reason why I brought Her Highness here is to look for you, because only you can awaken Her Highness, the princess's sealed memories." With these words, Earth Chief fixed his gaze on Nyetion, his eyes flickering, making him look somewhat strange. "I'm the only one who can restore Shui-Er's memories," Nyetion muttered. Then he turned to Shui-Er and asked why. Earth Chief laughed bitterly. "Because you have the tear of an empress in your body. I don't think you know what the tear of the princess is. Am I right?" Nyetion couldn't help but become nervous when he heard Earth Chief mention the tear of the princess. He said, "I really don't know what the tear of the princess is, but I do know that it is something Cher left for me, so I will definitely treasure it. It is absolutely impossible for you to take back the tear of the princess. Don't be nervous." Earth Chief couldn't help but smile when he sensed Nyetion's hostility. He said, "The tear of the princess was indeed given to you by Her Highness, so it is yours. I can promise you right now that the inescapable net will no longer try to steal the tear of the princess from you." "Promise?" Nyetion chuckled. "Lion Jiofeng is very interested in the tear of the princess. He's willing to kill me for it. His Highness was a bit extreme in his actions. Please forgive him. However, he is no longer a problem. Even if the tear of the princess is extremely important to him, he will no longer have any designs on the tear of the princess," Earth Chief said with a faint smile. Nyetion couldn't help but be surprised when Earth Chief called Lian Jiofeng Your Highness. Even now, he had no idea what the relationship between Lian Jiofeng, Cher, and the Underworld Emperor was. Cher was called the princess, and Lian Jiofeng was called the prince. From the way they addressed each other, it seemed like they were brother and sister. However, Cher and Lian Jiofeng were polar opposites. One was pure and holy, and the other evil and vicious. Could Cher and Lian Jiofeng be the children of the Underworld Emperor? A strange thought popped into Nyetion's mind, but he immediately rejected it. If Cher and Lian Jiofeng's relationship with the Underworld Emperor was this simple, Fat Cat wouldn't have been so secretive about it. The Underworld Emperor and the ancient Ming race. This was a mystery that only grew messier the more he thought about it. Nyetion decided to stop thinking about it. Right now, his greatest priority was to recover Cher's memories. After calming down, Nyetion turned to Earth Chieftain and asked, "Lord Earth Chieftain, are you saying that the princess's tear can help Snow recover her memories?" Earth Chief smiled and said, "The tear of the princess is one of the conditions for the princess to recover her memories, but it's far from enough. If you want Her Highness to recover her memory completely, you need to fulfill other conditions." "Recover her memories completely? What does this mean?" Nyetion noticed Earth Chief's words and couldn't help but focused his gaze as he asked. Completely recovering her memories means that Her Highness will recover all of her memories, including the time she spent with you, as well as the memories of 3 lifetimes deep within her mind. Earth Chief didn't hide anything, and instead explained everything truthfully. The memories of 3 lives. Nietion's eyes flickered. He recalled that the heavenly gift and earthly chief had once tried to use the 3 lives samsara disc to help Shui recover her memories. Unfortunately, the 3 lives samsara disc had been accidentally activated by Nietion, so Shui-Er's memories had not been restored. Yes, the memories of 3 lives. Earth Chief nodded with a smile. He looked at Nietion with an extremely strange gaze and said, "The princess will return to herself sooner or later. You know this, don't you?" Nietion frowned. He thought for a moment and said, "You don't need to provoke me. Since I've already agreed to the deal, I will help Cher recover her memories no matter what." Nietion knew that Cher's identity was not simple. He had once worried that Cher wouldn't recognize him after recovering her memories of 3 lives. He was worried that he would lose Cher because of this. However, he was no longer worried. He understood that Cher would definitely return to her complete self. Once Cher recovered her memories of 3 lives, he would accept whatever choice Cher made. "Very well." Earth Chief smiled and continued, "Since you've agreed, I won't waste any more time. If you want to help the princess recover her memories, you need to take her somewhere other than the tier of the princess." "What place?" Nietion's eyes narrowed. He knew that the place Earth Chief was talking about must be an unusual place. Myriad Degrees, Demon Abyss. Earth Chief's expression changed slightly as he uttered a name. Myriad Degrees, Demon Abyss? Nietion was startled. Just from a name, he could guess that it was an extremely dangerous place. However, he had never heard of this place before. He couldn't help but ask, "What is this place?" "A place that has long been forgotten by the world." Earth Chief's eyes trembled slightly, as if he had thought of something. He paused for a moment before saying, "The Myriad Degrees Demon Abyss does not belong to the 9 domains. It is in another mysterious domain. You don't need to know too much right now. You only need to know that the Myriad Degrees Demon Abyss is an extremely good place. You will encounter many extinct races there." Eyebrows furrowed. Nietion looked at Earth Chief's enigmatic expression and somehow felt a bit of anticipation towards the Devil Abyss. However, at this time, Earth Chief suddenly raised his brows and looked at Nietion. "Your current strength is still too weak. If you enter the Myriad Degrees Demon Abyss with your current strength, I'm afraid you won't survive more than 2 days." Nietion was startled. He curled his lips slightly and said, "I know my strength very well. I don't need you to remind me. Don't be angry. I'm just telling the truth." Earth Chief smiled faintly and flipped his hand. A white ball of light appeared in his palm, radiating an extremely powerful aura of life. "This is..." Nietion's eyes trembled when he saw the white ball of light. His expression immediately became dazed. "The Terra Vein Source." Earth Chief smiled faintly and said, "Consider this a small gift for you. Fuse with the Terra Vein Source. I'm sure your strength will increase. Take it." With that, Earth Chief handed over the Terra Vein Source. Nietion's eyes trembled slightly as he accepted the Terra Vein Source. Back at the 9 Dragons Earth Vein, the Terra Vein Source had been divided into 3 parts. One was obtained by Nietion, one was obtained by Lian Jiufeng, and one was obtained by Luo Xian. After Luo Xian died, the Terra Vein Source in her body was stolen by Lian Jiufeng. Earth Chief must have obtained the Terra Vein Source from Lian Jiufeng. Chapter 2034. Looking at the Terra Source in his hand, Nietion's lips curled up. He really didn't think that Earth Leader would give him the Terra Source. This was a pretty good surprise. "Nietion, how long do you need to deal with the matter at hand?" Earth Leader asked bluntly. After a moment of pondering, Nietion gave a conservative estimate. About half a month. In fact, Third Lady Gongsuan's matter was over. Next, Nietion needed to deal with the Inky Dragon Sword. At the same time, he calculated that Rui Qianyu was about to merge with the Slaughter Inheritance, so he still needed to deal with the matter at hand. Half a month's time was enough for him. Half a month, Earth Leader murmured, then smiled and said, Good. Then we'll meet in half a month at the God Exclusion Zone, Demon Sealing City. Lord Earth Leader, you trust me so much. Aren't you afraid that I won't go? Nyetian asked Earth Leader with a faint smile. Earth Leader also smiled and said confidently, Nyetian, I, Earth Leader, have lived for hundreds of thousands of years. I believe I have some ability to judge people. You're not the kind of person to go back on your word. Nyetian shook his head with a smile. Then it's a promise. In half a month at the God Exclusion Zone, Demon Sealing City. Earth Leader nodded and looked at Cher. He bowed and said, Your Highness, let's go. Cher nodded lightly. Her beautiful eyes roamed over Nyetian. She seemed to want to say something, but in the end, she didn't. Earth Leader and Cher didn't linger. They moved and left directly. Nyetian couldn't help but frown as he watched the two leave. Worry appeared on his face. He was very puzzled as to why Er's memories would be sealed. From Earth Leader's reaction, the inescapable net was also very anxious about this matter. That was why they had traveled tens of thousands of miles to the Sea of Evil Edge to find Nyetian. In order to help Cher recover her memory, the inescapable net not only sent Earth Leader to negotiate, but also offered very generous conditions. First, they saved Third Lady Gong's son. Then they offered the Terror Source. From this, it could be seen that the inescapable net attached great importance to Cher's memory recovery. Whether Cher can recover her memory or not is related to the Underworld Emperor's awakening. Of course, the inescapable net is very nervous. At this moment, Little Fat Cat's voice rang out, but there was a trace of unconcealable worry in its tone. Little Fatty, what did you sense? Nyetian was taken aback and couldn't help but ask. Little Fat Cat shook its head and said, Nyetian, I just have a very strange feeling. Perhaps after regains her memories, something terrible will happen. What do you mean? Nyetian frowned, a worried look on his face. I don't know either. The fat cat had a conflicted look on its face as it said, However, my chinchilla intuition has always been very accurate, so you have to be mentally prepared. Nyetian nodded and said, No matter what happens after Cher recovers her memories, I will accept it. Letting Cher recover her memories was Nyetian's choice. No matter what the result was, he would accept it. Fatty, have you heard of the Myriad Devil Abyss? Nyetian suddenly thought of the Myriad Devil Abyss and couldn't help asking. He was very curious as to what kind of place the Myriad Devil Abyss was. According to Earth Chief, the Myriad Devil Abyss was in another realm outside of the 9 realms. He also said something very interesting. He said that Nyetian would encounter many extinct races in the Myriad Devil Abyss. This made Nyetian look forward to the Myriad Devil Abyss even more. He couldn't wait to see what kind of world the legendary Myriad Devil Abyss was. No, unexpectedly, the fat cat shook its head and said, This noble one has never heard of the Myriad Devil Abyss. Nyetian was startled and couldn't help but wonder, Even you haven't heard of the Myriad Devil Abyss? It seems that it is indeed a very mysterious place. Nyetian knew that the 9-tailed chinchilla's inherited memories were stored in the fat cat's mind. Those were enormous memories accumulated over countless years. The fat cat now had 6 tails, and more than half of its memories had been awakened, but it had never heard of the Myriad Devil Abyss. It was indeed a mysterious place. No wonder Earth Chief said that the Myriad Devil Abyss was a place forgotten by the world. Nyetian did not linger. He left directly and returned to the city lord's estate very quickly. As soon as he returned to the courtyard, he saw Nye Dao and Guiwu Kwangsha. Grandfather, Lord Guiwu. Guiwu Kwangsha was not an outsider, so Nyetian obviously did not avoid anything. He bowed slightly. Nyetian, I'll be leaving soon. Nye Dao walked up, patted Nyetian's shoulder, and said with a gratified expression. He had not seen Nyetian for 2 years, and the latter's strength had increased far more than he had expected. In particular, when Guiwu Kwangsha told him that Nyetian had defeated the Sacred Parliament's Sacred Sword Kanglin, Nye Dao felt like he was dreaming. Nye Dao had heard of how monstrous Sacred Sword Kanglin was, But he could never have imagined that Nye Tian, who was only an early stage over God, could defeat Kanglin. He saw a terrifying possibility in Nye Tian. Once Nye Tian's strength reached the peak of the over-God realm, he would definitely crush all the martial practitioners of the 9 realms, including the 9 gods of calamity. Grandfather, how is Rushi? Nye Tian's eyes flickered slightly. He asked. The person he was most concerned about was Mo Rushi, and of course the child in her womb. If not for the Sacred Parliament and Xingtian Alliance's coercion, he would not have left Mo Rushi and her son. Nye Tian, don't worry. Rushi is currently in the Nye family's ancestral land. She is very safe. I can guarantee with my life that as long as the Wind and Cloud Alliance still exists, my granddaughter-in-law and her son will not be in any danger. Nye Dao nodded solemnly. The wrinkles on his face were trembling. He had been unable to protect his son back then, but now he would definitely protect Mo Rushi and the others even if he had to give it his all. Nye Tian nodded deeply. He would not say thank you to his family. Although he had not spent much time with Nye Dao, he could feel deep love from this old man. Perhaps Nye Dao felt that he owed Nye Fenghua too much, so he wanted to make up for it with Nye Tian. Nye Tian, your talent is far above your father's. I believe that you will definitely become a supreme existence in the 9 realms in the future. Nye Dao's expression flickered as he looked at Nye Tian. He was extremely proud to have such an outstanding grandson. Grandfather, believe me, it won't be long before I end my current state of running around. The moment I reach the peak will be the time when the Sacred Parliament and Xingtian Alliance pay the price. Nye Tian nodded slightly. He looked into the distance, his heart filled with lofty sentiments. Nye Dao could feel Nye Tian's strong confidence, and the corners of his eyes actually became wet. He could not remember how many years it had been since he last shed tears, but now he really could not control himself. Chapter 2035. At this moment, Nye Tian suddenly thought of something and could not help but look at Nye Dao. Grandfather, there's something I don't quite understand. I'd like to ask you. What is it? Nye Dao was stunned. My body has fused with the earth vein essence, but because of that, I've been hunted down by the Zhou family. It seems that the Zhou family is extremely interested in the earth vein essence. Even the patriarch of the Zhou family has personally appeared. If not for Lord Gui Wu protecting me, I would have probably died at the hands of the patriarch. I really want to know why the Zhou family is so interested in the earthline source. Nye Tian frowned as he recalled the time when he was chased by the Zhou family. Of course, he was not complaining to Nye Dao. He was just curious as to why the Zhou family was so interested in the earthline source. So something like that actually happened. Nye Dao's eyes trembled and immediately spat out in intense rage. He never thought that the patriarch of the Zhou family would actually make a move against Nye Tian. Grandfather, I don't want you to seek revenge on the Zhou family. I just feel that this matter is a little strange. Nye Tian nodded. Nye Dao calmed down, but his expression changed. After a moment of silence, he finally said, I do know that the Zhou family wants the earthline source, but I can't tell you why. This is a secret regarding the 9 great clans of creation. Only the patriarchs of the 9 clans have the right to know about it. When you're strong enough one day, I'll pass the position of patriarch to you. At that time, you'll know why the Zhou family wants the earthline source. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, but he could only nod without asking any further. In reality, he had an even greater doubt in his heart, but since Nye Dao could not say it, he did not pursue the matter. He was truly curious about what kind of shocking secret the 9 great clans of creation were hiding. Nye Tian had heard a lot about the 9 great clans who had created the world, but he didn't know the truth. Perhaps only when he became the clan master of the Nye clan would he be able to truly understand the 9 great clans. Nye Dao did not delay any further. As the leader of the Wind and Cloud Alliance, he could not leave the alliance for too long, especially after his conflict with Zhonglai. Grandpa, I definitely won't let you down. Nye Tian looked at Nye Dao's departing figure and said heavily in his heart. After Nye Dao left, only Nye Tian and Guiwu Quangsha were left in the small courtyard. Nietion naturally knew why the ghost Marshal Wildsand had come. It was definitely because of the matter regarding Jian Qingqi. With a thought from Nietion, the 9 extremes appeared, and Jian Jingyun walked out of it. After Jian Jingyun was injured, he had been recuperating in the 9 extreme. He was Jian Qingqi's grandson, so he should know about Jian Qingqi's matters. Jian Jingyun, it seems like you've recovered quite well. Nietion looked at Jian Jingyun. The latter's aura had already recovered. In a few more days, he would completely recover. Yes, Jian Jingyun slightly nodded his head, the corners of his mouth rose, and he said, Nietion, thank you very much. Nietion only smiled. With a flip of his palm, the inky jade dragon sword appeared in his hand. This is... Jian Jingyun suddenly saw the long sword in Nietion's hand, and his expression instantly changed. He said in shock, Inky Jade Dragon Sword. The reason why he was so shocked was not only because the Inky Jade Dragon Sword was a famous sword that was comparable to the sacred sword in the 9 territories, but also because Jian Qingqi's soul was sealed within the Inky Jade Dragon Sword. When Guiwu Quangsha saw the Inky Jade Dragon Sword, his eyes couldn't help but tremble, revealing a blazing divine light. Lord Guiwu, Jian Jingyun, don't be anxious. It won't be easy to release the Sword Elder's soul from the Inky Jade Dragon Sword. Nietion smiled bitterly. He had already sensed that there was an extremely powerful spiritual seal within the Inky Jade Dragon Sword. Even he couldn't sense the existence of the Sword Elder's soul. Only the fat cat could barely sense it. Guiwu Quangsha and Jian Jingyun's senses were below Nietion's, so they couldn't sense the existence of Jian Qingqi at all. Spiritual seal. When Guiwu Quangsha and Jian Jingyun heard Nietion's words, their faces changed. It seemed that the situation was more complicated than they had imagined. Rescuing Jian Qingqi wasn't going to be an easy task. Fat, come out. Nietion shouted for Fat Cat to come out. If they wanted to break the spiritual seal within the Inky Jade Dragon Sword, they still needed to rely on Fat Cat. Fat Cat's figure appeared on Nietion's shoulder, but her face didn't look good. Fat, is the spiritual seal within the Inky Jade Dragon Sword very difficult to break? Nietion couldn't help but frown when he saw the ugly expression on Fat Cat's face. Fat Cat shook her head, sighed softly, and said, I have already sensed it. The spiritual seal within the Inky Jade Dragon Sword isn't very strong. I will be able to break it in a few days. However, the most troublesome thing is how to reconstruct Jian Qingqi's body. What do you mean? Nietion was stunned for a moment and asked back. Guiwu Quangsha and Jian Jingyun's eyes were burning with passion, waiting for Fat Cat to explain clearly. Fat Cat smiled bitterly and said, You all know that after a divine realm warrior dies, if the divine spark isn't destroyed, the soul won't be destroyed either. At this time, as long as the soul has found a suitable replacement for the body, the warrior can be reborn. Yes, Nietion and the others nodded. They obviously knew this point. The divine spark originally contained the warrior's complete soul and memories. As long as the divine spark wasn't destroyed, the warrior would have the chance to be reborn. Fat Cat smiled bitterly again and said, Then have you ever heard of many warriors who used the divine spark to be reborn after they died? Nietion was stunned and couldn't help but shake his head. Although the divine spark wasn't destroyed and could be reborn, there weren't many warriors who could truly be reborn. Fat Cat nodded with a smile and continued, Warriors can use the divine spark to be reborn, but those who actually do it and succeed are few and far between. It's not because of anything else. It's because it's very difficult to find a suitable replacement body. Generally speaking, the stronger a warrior is, the stronger their martial body and the stronger their soul. Therefore, the stronger the warrior, the higher the requirement for a replacement body. It's already very difficult to find a replacement body for a lower god warrior, and it's even more difficult to find a replacement body for a paramount god warrior. It's precisely because of this reason that it's very difficult for those paramount gods to be reborn, even if their divine sparks remain after they die. Jian Qingqi was already an early paramount god expert, and his soul is very powerful. It's very difficult to find a suitable replacement body. Speaking up to here, Fat Cat couldn't help but sigh. Fat, no matter how strong Sword Elder's soul is, it can't be stronger than Sakura. Since we can find a suitable body for Sakura, why can't we find a suitable body for Sword Elder? Nyetian asked with a frown. The stronger a warrior was when they were alive, the higher the requirement for a replacement body. Nyetian understood this very well. After all, as a warrior grew stronger, their martial experience would become more complex and powerful. However, he didn't expect that Jian Qingqi was already an early paramount god expert hundreds of thousands of years ago. Even so, Jian Qingqi's soul couldn't be stronger than Sakura's. One must know that Sakura was a peak paramount god expert. Chapter 2036. Nyetian found it strange. Did Fat Cat think that finding a body for Sword Elder would be harder than finding a body for Sakura Tian? Nyetian, let me ask you, do you still remember what Sure Tian's physical body is? Little Fat Cat's figure moved and floated in the air, its pair of blue eyes staring at Nyetian as it asked. The heart of the Ice Devil. Nyetian nodded. Of course he remembered what Sakura Tian's body was. It was the heart of the Ice Devil. The heart of the Ice Devil was the crystallization of the power of an ancient beast, the Ice Devil Silkworm. It contained an extremely powerful life force, which was why Sakura Tian could be resurrected. However, the heart of the Ice Devil was very difficult to find. Nyetian had only found it by chance when he killed Bing Shuang Han during the Jiu Ying's hunting ban. It would be almost impossible for him to find another ice demon's heart. Yes, the heart of the Ice Devil. Fat Cat nodded. It was a complete coincidence that we were able to obtain the heart of the Ice Devil. Otherwise, we would have to use the 7-leaf dragon's mouth orchid to reconstruct Sakura Tian's body. Although the 7-leaf dragon's mouth orchid could also resurrect Sakura Tian, it definitely wouldn't make him so strong. After Sakura Tian was resurrected, he was able to retain his original Sword Dao cultivation, and even his martial Dao cultivation was restored to the early paramount god level. This wasn't because of his powerful soul, but because of the heart of the Ice Devil. At this time, Jian Jingyan couldn't help but interrupt. Lord Fat, I don't need Grandpa to be strong after his resurrection. As long as he can be resurrected, it's fine. Nyetian nodded. Since the 7-leaf dragon's mouth orchid can be Sakura Tian's body, it can also be Sword Elder's body. Even if Sword Elder doesn't have the same strength after his resurrection, it doesn't matter. Fat Cat looked at Jian Jingyan and Nyetian. She shook her head and sighed. You two are too naive. If the 7-leaf dragon's mouth orchid could really be Jian Qingqi's body, I wouldn't have to worry so much. What do you mean? Nyetian and Jian Jingyan were startled at the same time. So they asked in astonishment. If the 7-leaf dragon's tongue orchid couldn't become Jian Qingqi's body, could it be that his soul was stronger than Sakura's? When a cultivator's soul was reborn, the replacement of the physical body was very important. The most suitable replacement of the physical body could not only restore the cultivator's strength to its original state, but could even increase the cultivator's martial Dao talent. However, Nyetian and Jian Jingyan did not have many requests. They only wanted Jian Qingqi to be revived. But now, it seemed like it would be extremely difficult for Jian Qingqi to revive. Fine, I'll tell you the truth then. When Fat Cat saw how anxious Nyetian and Jian Jingyan were, she could only shake her head and say, originally, Jian Qingqi's soul was not very strong. However, the problem is that his previous body was very special, causing his soul to mutate. Therefore, ordinary body replacements are not suitable for him. Unique physical body? Nyetian frowned and said directly, Fat, just say it. Yes. Fat Cat nodded her head. She hesitated for a moment before saying, Jian Qingqi's original martial body was fused with a type of power, a type of origin energy. The fire origin energy, leaf fire essence. This, when Nyetian, Jian Jingyan, and Ghost Martial Wild Sand heard Fat Cat's words, they were stunned at the same time. They were so shocked that they could not speak. They never thought that Jian Qingqi had fused with a type of origin energy when he was alive. Moreover, it was the fire origin energy, leaf fire essence. Fat Cat looked at the shocked expressions of the three and could not help but laugh bitterly. She said, "It is because Jian Qingqi fused with the leaf fire essence that his previous body was very unique. This also caused his soul to mutate. Therefore, the 7 leaf dragon's tongue orchid could not become his body." Nietian and the others were stunned on the spot. They could not say a word for a long time, especially Nietian. His eyes were dull, as if he was thinking about something. After a while, Ghost Marshal Wildsand and Jian Jingyun's expressions slightly calmed down. However, Nietian's expression became more and more shocked. It was as if he had discovered something very frightening. Origin energy. It was the origin energy again. The fire origin energy, leaf fire essence. This was the 4th type of origin energy that Nietian had come into contact with. Currently, there were 2 types of origin energy in his body. The earth origin energy was the earth veins origin. The darkness origin energy was the heart of darkness. The earth veins origin was a part of the earth vein. The darkness origin was one of the 3 bodies of the dark abyss. The origin energy that Nietian had fused with was not complete. However, it was of great help to his martial body, especially the earth veins origin. It allowed him to have a recovery ability that far surpassed ordinary people. As for the heart of darkness, Nietian had never used it before. Therefore, he was not sure of the true power of the darkness origin. In addition, he had also met the swordsman who possessed the wind origin energy, the storm's extremity, Xianyuan Yinsong. And now, he had learned from Fat Cat that the sword elder had actually fused with the fire origin energy. Actually, when he asked Nie Dao about how he was being hunted down by the Zhou clan for possessing the Terra Vein source, he already had a very strange guess in his heart. Now, he felt that his guess might be correct. Nie Tian felt that the 9 great families of the world creation were related to the 9 great origin energy. The earth origin energy was related to the Zhou family. Therefore, Nie Tian, who possessed the earth veins origin, was pursued by the Zhou family. The darkness origin energy was related to the Qi Wu family. This was because Nie Tian's heart of darkness had been obtained from the Qi Wu family's ancestral land. Moreover, the Holy Mother of Jiuying also had the darkness origin energy within her body. The wind origin energy was related to the Xianyuan family. Therefore, Xianyuan Yunsong's body had the storm's power. The fire origin energy was related to the Jian family. Jian Qingqi had fused with the power of the leaf fire essence. All the origin energy that Nie Tian had encountered was related to the 9 great families of the world's creation. Therefore, he vaguely felt that the 9 great origin energy might be related to the 9 great families of the world's creation. Previously, Nie Dao had said that the 9 great families of the world's creation were hiding a big secret. Nie Tian guessed that this big secret might be related to the 9 great origin energy. However, Nie Dao had also said that this secret could only be known by the heads of the 9 great families. Moreover, it was absolutely not allowed to be leaked to others. Otherwise, Nie Dao wouldn't have kept it a secret from Nie Tian. What exactly was the relationship between the 9 great families of the world's creation and the 9 great origin energy? When Nie Tian thought of this, his face trembled. He vaguely felt that he was getting closer to a shocking secret. Nie Tian, are you all right? Fat Cat couldn't help but shout when she saw that Nie Tian hadn't reacted for a long time. Only then did Nie Tian react. He waved his hand and said, "I'm fine." He didn't voice his conjecture. On one hand, he didn't want Fat Cat to worry. On the other hand, it was just his conjecture. It hadn't been verified yet. Fat, could it be because the Sword Elder once fused with the fire origin energy that his physical body can't be reconstructed? Nie Tian became cold and asked solemnly. Chapter 2037. When Nie Tian and the others heard Fat Cat's words, they were stunned and remained silent. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. Nie Tian tried his best to obtain the inky Jade Dragon Sword to revive Jian Qingqi. Who would have thought that even after obtaining the inky jade dragon sword, he still couldn't revive Jian Qingqi? But you don't have to worry too much. At least Jian Qingqi is safe in the inky jade dragon sword. Although it's hard to find a replacement for his body, it doesn't mean that it's impossible. Anyway, there will be plenty of opportunities in the future. As long as you have the confidence, you can definitely find one. Fat Cat smiled and comforted everyone awkwardly. Nietian coughed and nodded heavily. Since things have come to this point, this is the only way. Gui Wuquangsha and Jian Jingyun nodded helplessly. They could only accept reality. Originally, Nietian planned to give the inky jade dragon sword to Gui Wuquangsha or Jian Jingyun, but now he can only carry it himself. Now, Fat Cat is the only one who can communicate with Jian Qingqi. Perhaps things will take a turn for the better in the future. Nietian will soon go to the 10,000-degree demon abyss. It is a very mysterious place. If he is lucky, he may be able to find something suitable to be Jian Qingqi's body. Fat, since Jian Qingqi has fused with the fire origin energy, where is the fire origin energy now? Is it imprisoned in the inky jade dragon sword? Nietian suddenly thought of the fire origin energy and couldn't help but ask. Of course not. Fat Cat bitterly smiled and said, since Jiang Lai destroyed Jian Qingqi's body, of course he took the fire origin energy for himself. Perhaps this is why he captured Jian Qingqi. Nietian froze for a moment and couldn't help but shake his head. Originally, he wanted to see what the fire origin energy was like. Now, it seems that he was thinking too much. Jiang Lai, Jian Jingyun, swear that one day I will kill you with my own hands. Jian Jingyun clenched his fists and roared with a ferocious expression. Nietian patted Jian Jingyun on the shoulder, signaling him to calm down. The matter of Jian Qingqi could only be dealt with like this for now. Gui Wuquangsha and Jian Jingyun talked with Nietian for a while before leaving. Nietian returned to his room alone and was in a bad mood. It wasn't easy to obtain the black jade dragon sword, but he still couldn't revive Jian Qingqi. He couldn't even communicate with Jian Qingqi. How could he not be depressed? I wonder how Rui Qinyu is doing. Looking at the time, the inheritance fusion should be over soon. Nietian thought of Rui Qinyu and prepared to go to the 9 Superbs to take a look. However, at that moment, the Fat Cat's voice rang out. Nietian, I have something to remind you of. What is it? Nietian was stunned for a moment. He felt that Fat Cat's tone was a bit off, and his face couldn't help but sink. It's about the 9 Superbs Chaos Beast, the Fat Cat said solemnly. 9 Superbs Chaos Beast. Nietian's eyes trembled, and then he laughed. Fat, I was going to tell you about this too. During the battle of the top 8 of Xie Feng's sword conference, Little 9 appeared. That power is insane. I don't even know when Little 9 grew to such a terrifying level. Nietian, that's what I want to talk to you about. The Fat Cat's face was very ugly. Nietian, don't you think that the 9 Superbs Chaos Beast is unbelievably strong? Nietian frowned and couldn't help but nod. The Fat Cat was right. The 9 Superbs Chaos Beast was ridiculously strong. With his current battle prowess, he could even contend against a middle paramount god if he went all out. The reason he could defeat the late-stage paramount god Songlan was because the latter's sword intent was strange. It had an effect on his forbidden talisman. If it weren't for that, it would have been very difficult for Nietian to defeat Songlan. But when the 9 Superbs Chaos Beast appeared and slapped the mid-stage paramount god Soul Remnant to death, Feng Hua and Bing Hong were so frightened that they immediately admitted defeat. The 9 Superbs Chaos Beast battle prowess was far beyond Nietian's expectations. Nietian estimated that the 9 Superbs Chaos Beast's current battle prowess was slightly on par with a slightly weaker peak paramount god. But that was the strangest part, because Nietian himself was only an early stage over god. A martial artist's primordial spirit was naturally connected to their aura. The stronger the martial artist, the stronger their primordial spirit, and the weaker the martial artist, the weaker their primordial spirit. But the 9 Superbs Chaos Beast was completely different from Nietian's strength. It had nothing to do with Nietian's own strength. In truth, when the Nine Superbs Chaos Beast was first born, Nietion had discovered that it was a primordial spirit with its own consciousness. It was as if the Nine Superbs Chaos Beast didn't rely on Nietion to exist. Instead, it was temporarily residing in Nietion's primordial spirit space. Nietion forced himself to calm down and asked in a deep voice, "Fatty, did you discover something?" The fat cat nodded. "I have some memories of the Nine Superbs Chaos Beast. Although the images aren't clear, I can tell that the Nine Superbs Chaos Beast doesn't belong to this world." "Doesn't belong to this world?" Nietion was stunned. His expression changed, and he was shocked. He really didn't understand what the fat cat meant when it said the Nine Superbs Chaos Beast didn't belong to this world. The Nine Superbs Chaos Beast was in his primordial spirit space. It had helped him survive many dangerous situations. It was too contradictory to say that the Nine Superbs Chaos Beast didn't belong to this world. The fat cat shook its head. Its expression became strange. "I don't know why, but the Nine Superbs Chaos Beast is too strong. There shouldn't be such a strong thing in this world." "Too strong?" Nietion was stunned. "The Nine Superbs Chaos Beast is very strong, but compared to a peak paramount god, it's still much weaker." "Nietion, don't you understand?" The fat cat shook its head. "The Nine Superbs Chaos Beast is still in its infancy. If it grows up, this world won't be able to contain it." When Nietion heard the fat cat's words, his expression froze. He couldn't help but gulp. How could he believe that the Nine Superbs Chaos Beast was still in its infancy? When the Nine Superbs Chaos Beast appeared, its body was thousands of meters long. A young creature that was a few thousand meters in size. That was too ridiculous. If what the fat cat said was true, then the Nine Superbs Chaos Beast was really strong. It shouldn't exist in this world. But what Nietion didn't understand was, if the Nine Superbs Chaos Beast wasn't a creature of this world, why was it born in his primordial spirit space? It didn't make sense. Chapter 2038. In the room, Nietion heard the fat cat warning him not to use the Nine Extreme Chaos Beast again. He was stunned and speechless for a long time. After a while, Nietion's expression recovered slightly. He asked doubtfully, "Fat, why can't I use the Nine Extreme Chaos Beast again?" "I don't know either." Unexpectedly, the fat cat shook its head and said, "I have a very strong feeling that if you continue to use the Nine Extreme Chaos Beast, something terrible will happen." This, Nietion was speechless. He said, "Can't I use the Nine Extremes Chaotic Beast even in a life or death situation?" The fat cat didn't know why, but it didn't allow Nietion to use the Nine Extreme Chaos Beast again. This made him a little depressed. "You can't use it." The fat cat shook its head and said, "Even in the most dangerous situation, you can't use the Nine Extreme Chaos Beast. Otherwise, you will definitely regret it." Nietion frowned, and his expression froze. The fat cat said this just based on a feeling. Wasn't it a little too shocking? The fat cat looked at Nietion. Nietion seemed to be a little suspicious. The fat cat's face darkened again. "Nietion, you must remember what I said. You must never use the Nine Extreme Chaos Beast again." All right, I promise you." Seeing the little fat cat's reaction, Nietion could only nod his head and promise. Although he didn't know why the fat cat was so nervous, he trusted the fat cat's judgment. However, he was very confused. What kind of existence was the Nine Extreme Chaos Beast? Why was the fat cat so afraid? Actually, Nietion didn't know that when he was fighting with Bawu Chinchio on the path of massacre, the massacring demon Venerable had said the same thing when he used the Nine Extreme Chaos Beast. The Nine Extreme Chaos Beast was a primordial spirit that shouldn't exist in this world. The massacring demon Venerable was also very confused. Why would a Ninth Extreme Chaos Beast appear on Nietion's body? After receiving Fat Cat's warning, Nietion slowly regained his composure. Next, he took out the Nine Extremities. With a single thought, he entered the Nine Extremities. Nietion. As soon as Nietion entered the Nine Extreme, Sakura's figure appeared. The way he looked at Nietion was very strange, releasing an abnormally excited expression. "What's wrong?" Nyetian was stunned for a moment, unable to react. "Look up and you'll know." Sakura laughed and pointed to the sky with his little finger. Nyetian's eyes narrowed as he raised his head to look at the sky. At this moment, the scene that greeted Nyetian's eyes caused him to be completely stunned. In the space, the path of slaughter was floating, constantly releasing colorful lights that flowed in all directions. The gorgeous and gentle light filled the space, and the world was filled with a kind of pure and holy aura. Such a scene was too beautiful. It was so beautiful that it was dazzling, so beautiful that it could move one's soul, so beautiful that it should not exist. What's going on?" Nyetian was stunned and said in a daze. He did not expect that there would be such a scene in the Nine Extremities. "I don't know either. This scene has been going on for a long time. It seems that something is happening in the path of slaughter," Sakura explained softly, as if he was unwilling to disturb the peace of the beautiful scenery in front of him. "This should be the nine-color dreamland of the nine-color pupils." At this time, the figure of Fat Cat appeared. Looking at the scene in the sky, her face was trembling. "Nine-color dreamland?" Nyetian was stunned for a moment, and he said in astonishment, "Could it be that Rui Qinyu's nine-color pupils have all nine pupils opened?" All nine pupils opened. That was too terrifying. Nyetian remembered that before Rui Qinyu integrated the path of slaughter, she only opened 6 pupils. "Yes, it's very likely." The fat cat's face was trembling slightly, and she nodded and said, "Gulp." Nyetian's eyes trembled, and his throat moved. The shock in his heart was written on his face. The inheritance of slaughter actually made Rui Qinyu open all 9 pupils. That was too terrifying. He really didn't know what realm Rui Qinyu's strength would be improved after integrating the inheritance of slaughter. Nyetian, looking at the situation, Rui Qinyu's integration of the inheritance of slaughter is about to end, and she will come out of the path of slaughter soon. Fat Cat calmed down and smiled, as if she was looking forward to it very much. Nyetian was also excited, and he said, "I don't know what realm Qinyu's strength will reach after integrating the inheritance of slaughter. I remember she was a higher deity before. I wonder if she can break through to the Lord level." "Break through to the Lord level?" Fat Cat raised her eyebrows, and she looked at Nyetian unhappily. "My requirement is too high." Nyetian was stunned, and he smiled awkwardly. "Then she should at least be at the peak of the higher deity." Fat Cat looked at Nyetian again, and she directly rolled her eyes and said, "Kid, what do you think the sage's inheritance is? Cabbages on the street? It's a martial arts inheritance left by a sage. Many warriors can improve their strength to a whole new realm after integrating a martial arts inheritance. And Rui Qinyu integrated the martial arts inheritance left by the Slaughter Demon Venerable, who is very powerful even among the sages. My conservative estimate is that when Rui Qinyu walks out of the path of slaughter, she will at least be at the peak of the Lord level. Peak of the Lord level." Nyetian's expression suddenly changed, and even his voice was trembling. The inheritance of slaughter directly made Rui Qinyu advance from a higher deity to the peak of the Lord level. That's too crazy. Nyetian spent so much effort to integrate the forbidden skill and the origin power, and he only reached the early stage of the Lord level after working so hard. But Rui Qinyu directly integrated the inheritance of slaughter and reached the peak of the Lord level. He could not help but feel bitter. Sakura was also shocked. If he had integrated the inheritance of slaughter back then, he would definitely have reached the peak of the Lord level by now. Boom! Just at that moment, the path of slaughter suddenly trembled. Immediately, the rainbow light formed a halo of light that spread out in the air like ripples. The scene before them was extremely beautiful and intoxicating. Rui Qinyu is coming out. Fat Cat's eyes flickered, and there was a burning look in them. Just as his voice trailed off, a beam of light suddenly shot out of the path of slaughter, and then a figure walked out. Under the light, she looked holy, noble, beautiful, and mysterious. When Nyetian saw the figure's face, his eyes suddenly trembled, and he couldn't help but cry out, Rui Qianyu. But when he sent his divine sense over, his face stiffened, and he said in a daze, early stage of the Lord level. Early stage of the Lord level. Rui Qianyu's strength had actually reached the early stage of the Lord level. This was even more terrifying than Fat Cat had guessed. Fat Cat had indeed made a very conservative estimate. The moment Rui Qianyu's figure appeared, the colorful light in the air suddenly surged, and in the blink of an eye, all of it rushed into her body. The nine extremities world returned to its original peace. Rui Qianyu's figure moved, and she directly came to Nie Tian's side, a trace of excitement on her delicate face. But then she suddenly thought of something, and her expression became slightly nervous. She suddenly said to Nie Tian, "Nie Tian, the demon lord wants me to tell you something." Seeing that Rui Qianyu seemed to be very nervous, Nie Tian couldn't help but ask, "What is it?" Chapter 2039. 9-Level Chaos Beast. Nie Tian looked at Rui Qianyu. His eyes could not help but tremble, and his heart was filled with shock. Rui Qianyu had just walked out of the massacre path and successfully integrated the massacre inheritance. The first thing she did when she saw him was to mention the 9-Level Chaos Beast. How could Nie Tian not be surprised? Coincidentally, Fat Cat had also just mentioned the 9-Level Chaos Beast. He had also repeatedly warned Nie Tian not to use the 9-Level Chaos Beast again. Now, Rui Qianyu had mentioned the 9-Level Chaos Beast again. Moreover, it was the murderous demon Venerable who had asked her to pass on the message to Nie Tian. Of course, Nie Tian knew who the murderous demon Venerable was. Since he had specially told Rui Qianyu about the 9-Level Chaos Beast, it must be something extraordinary. At that moment, Nie Tian was also very curious about what the murderous demon Venerable would say. Regarding the 9-Level Chaos Beast, there were too many things that Nie Tian did not understand. There were also too many things that he wanted to understand. Nie Tian, the demon Venerable asked me to tell you that the 9-Level Chaos Beast is a primordial spirit that does not belong to this world. Rui Qianyu took a deep breath. Her delicate face was actually trembling slightly as she spoke in a low voice. Nie Tian's eyes suddenly shrank. His expression changed abruptly. He felt as if his head had been ruthlessly smashed by someone. A primordial spirit that does not belong to this world. It was the same sentence again. It was exactly the same as the reminder that Fat Cat had given previously. One could imagine the shock in Nie Tian's heart at that moment. Little girl, what else did the murderous demon Venerable say? At that moment, Fat Cat's eyes were burning as he asked nervously. The demon lord also said that the 9-Level Chaos Beast was a powerful holy beast that was born at the beginning of the primordial chaos. He was very confused as to why the 9-Level Chaos Beast would appear in this world and unexpectedly become Nie Tian's primordial spirit. Rui Qianyu thought for a while and said, "Mr. Demon King wants me to tell Nie Tian that he cannot use the 9-Level Chaos Beast in the future. Otherwise, he will attract very scary people." "What do you mean?" Nie Tian and Fat Cat were stunned at the same time, and then exclaimed at the same time, "I don't know either." Rui Qianyu shook her head. She was equally confused. She said, "The demon lord said that if Nie Tian continues to use the 9-Level Chaos Beast, he will bring disaster to the 9 major territories. Those who are interested in the 9-Level Chaos Beast can destroy all 9 realms in the blink of an eye." At this point, Rui Qianyu's voice trembled slightly. She was obviously very frightened. She clearly remembered that when the murderous demon Venerable told her these things, his eyes were so sad and desperate. To be able to make such a powerful person like the murderous demon Venerable feel despair, she wondered how powerful the person behind a 9-Level Chaos Beast was. It was because of this that Rui Qianyu told Nie Tian about the 9-Level Chaos Beast at the first moment. She knew that the murderous demon Venerable's words were definitely not a joke. This is so scary. After hearing Rui Qianyu's words, Nie Tian was stunned. He froze on the spot and did not react for a long time. He had originally thought that the Fat Cat's words were frightening enough, But he hadn't expected that Rui Qianyu's warning from the murderous demon Venerable would be even more frightening. According to the murderous demon Venerable, if Niet Tian continued to use the 9-level Chaos Beast, he would be detected by some terrifying figure. And these people would come to the 9 realms because of the 9-level Chaos Beast. When that time came, the 9 realms would be doomed. Could there really be such a terrifying existence who could destroy 9 realms in the blink of an eye? The strongest existence Niet Tian had encountered so far was a peak paramount god. He believed that peak paramount god experts had the power to destroy a world. In the planar worlds, such as the 3,000 lesser realms, peak paramount god experts could easily destroy them. But realms were different. They were high-level realms with stable space-time. Even experts like the 9 calamity gods could not pose a threat to realms, no matter how much trouble they caused. With Niet Tian's current strength, he couldn't imagine what kind of existence could destroy 9 realms in the blink of an eye. But he believed the murderous demon Venerable's words. There was no reason for the latter to lie to him. After a while, Niet Tian suppressed a shock and asked in a trembling voice, "China, did the demon Venerable say anything else?" The demon Venerable also said that he left some sealed memories in my black pupils. When you break through to the Saint Realm, you can retrieve the sealed memories. If you want to uncover the secrets behind the 9-level Chaos Beast, follow the instructions he left for you in the memories and go to the beginning of ancient times. As Rui Qianyu spoke, she frowned because she didn't know what the murderous demon Venerable had left behind. Niet Tian was stunned. It seemed that the murderous demon Venerable had left him some other information, but unfortunately, he couldn't see it now. According to the murderous demon Venerable, the 9-level Chaos Beast was born at the beginning of ancient times. But Niet Tian couldn't understand. What was the beginning of ancient times? Was it time period? Was it a place? Or was it a very powerful existence? These secrets could only be unraveled in the future. But he was quite gratified. It seemed that the murderous demon Venerable was very confident in him and knew that he would definitely be able to break through to the Saint Realm. Little girl, has the murderous demon Venerable already? At this time, the fat cat's eyes flickered as he looked at Rui Qianyu and asked tentatively. Yes. Rui Qianyu's expression was a little gloomy. She nodded and said, "The demon Venerable has already left." Niet Tian sighed. Of course, he understood that Rui Qianyu meant that the murderous demon Venerable had disappeared completely. In fact, he had long known that after Rui Qianyu merged with the murderous inheritance, the murderous demon Venerable would exhaust the last trace of his soul and disappear from this world. The reason why the murderous demon Venerable could exist for so long was actually to find a suitable successor for the murderous inheritance, and Rui Qianyu was the most suitable successor that he had found. After the murderous demon Venerable's reminder, Niet Tian made a decision in his heart. No matter what happened in the future, he would not use the 9-level Chaos Beast again. The 9-level Chaos Beast now was not only related to his life and death, but also the survival of the entire 9 major territories. If the 9 major territories suffered the fate of destruction because of the 9-level Chaos Beast, he would be guilty. "Qianya, let's go out first." Niet Tian forced a smile and prepared to leave the 9-level Chaos Beast first. He really wanted to see how powerful Rui Qianyu was now. Chapter 2040. When Niet Tian, Sakura, and Rui Qianyu left the Ninefold, they didn't stay in the courtyard. Instead, they went to the city lord's mansion. Niet Tian wanted to see how strong Rui Qianyu was. Since Xian Zongfeng had left the city, Sakura was safe and didn't need to hide in the Ninefold. Recently, Fat Cat had been observing Sakura, but strangely enough, he didn't seem to be affected by Lien Wui's blood-weeping sword soul. It was as if the blood-weeping sword soul didn't affect him at all, which puzzled Fat Cat. In any case, it was a good thing that Sakura wasn't affected by the blood-weeping sword soul. Therefore, Fat Cat didn't pay too much attention to it. Currently, Niet Tian and Rui Qianyu were standing on 2 enormous stone pillars, staring at each other. Of course, they weren't going to fight, but Niet Tian wanted to see how strong Rui Qianyu was. "You're an early paramount god now. Aren't you, Chinya? Nyetian asked with a faint smile. Yeah. Rui Chinyu nodded and smiled. Not only am I an early paramount god, but I've also opened all 9 of my 9-color pupils. I know. Nyetian smiled faintly. Back when he had been in the 9 Superbs, he had seen the 9-color dreamland. Therefore, he had long since learned that Raindrop Chinya had activated all 9 of her pupils. Come on, make your move. Let me see how strong you are. Nyetian produced the Starlight Heaven Slash. All right. The corners of Thousand Leaves Raindrop's mouth curled up into a smile. Then, she flipped her palms, and a ball of green light appeared in the center of her palms. She pushed her palms forward, and suddenly, countless sharp green blades appeared in the air and shot towards Nyetian. What sharp aura! When Nyetian sensed the incoming streams of energy, his expression flickered. Activating his warding talismans, he pushed his energy to the level of an early paramount god. Without hesitation, he swung his sword. Suddenly, the enormous sword will turned into a roaring shadow of the sword. Like a ferocious beast, it pounced towards Rui Chinyu. The green blades in the air shattered under the impact of the terrifying sword shadows, and an ear-piercing rustling sound was heard in the air. Rui Chinyu looked at the approaching sword, but she was not afraid at all. Her graceful body moved slightly, and suddenly, a green divine E-power appeared and formed a mystic jade shield around her body. Bang! In the next moment, the violent sword shadow descended and bombarded the mysterious jade shield. A muffled sound actually erupted, and the sword shadow directly collapsed. What a powerful shield, Nyetian said, his expression flickering. Never could he have guessed that Rui Chinyu's defenses would be this strong. Although Nyetian hadn't used his full strength in that attack, it had still been enough to pose a threat to a mid-paramount god. Unfortunately, it hadn't been enough to threaten Rui Chinyu. Watch out, Nyetian! Rui Chinyu shrieked. Blurring in emotion, she stamped her foot onto the ground, and her eyes flickered as she unleashed eye-power. Instantly, a stream of crimson flame appeared, spreading out for thousands of meters as it bore down on Nyetian. The power of the 9-color pupils. Nyetian's eyes flickered, and he stabbed his sword out, causing a fiery sword image to appear, which slammed into the incoming flame. This time, Nyetian was forced to use the power of his Star Soul Flame. Rumble, high up in the sky, the raging flames exploded and turned into a scorching blast that spread out in all directions. Ag! Right at this moment, Raindrop Thousand Leaves suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. Immediately, her figure was sent flying by the shockwave. Chinyu. The sudden change caused Nyetian's expression to flicker. A pair of Star Soul wings appeared on his back, and he directly passed through the waves of flames and shot towards Raindrop Thousand Leaves. In the blink of an eye, Nyetian arrived at Rui Chinyu's side and pulled her into his arms. Are you all right, Chinyu? Nyetian asked. Sensing Rui Chinyu's aura, he breathed a sigh of relief when he was sure she wasn't in any danger. I'm fine. Rui Chinyu frowned and murmured, I think it's because I just merged with the Slaughter inheritance, and the 9-color pupils are still adapting to it. That's why I lost control. Nyetian carefully sensed Rui Chinyu's aura again. Making sure she wasn't in danger, he was relieved and said, It's all my fault. I shouldn't have rushed to see your strength. Nyetian, Rui Chinyu raised her head and stared at Nyetian with her watery eyes. Her pretty face was extremely shy. Nyetian was stunned, and then he realized he was still holding Rui Chinyu. But he didn't let go. Instead, he suddenly lowered his head and pressed his hot lips on the girl's lips. Rui Chinyu didn't resist, but hugged Nyetian tightly. At this moment, Fat Cat retreated back into the origin fetus space and didn't look at Nyetian anymore. Sakura also moved and was about to leave. However, at this moment, a clear voice rang out. Little brother Sakura, you're here. Lien Wui suddenly appeared and called Sakura. Seeing Nyetian and Rui Chinyu, she couldn't help but shout, You, what are you doing? Nyetian and Rui Chinyu were shocked at the same time and quickly separated. Rui Qinyu blushed all the way to her ears. She was as shy as a flower. But Nye Tian didn't care. He smiled faintly and said, "Of course we're doing something serious." Sakura smiled awkwardly and quickly pulled Lien Wui away. "Qinyu, let's go." Nye Tian smiled faintly and said to Rui Qinyu, Go where?" Rui Qinyu was stunned for a moment. The blush on her face was still there. Nye Tian looked up at the sky and said, "It's getting late. Of course, we have to continue doing something serious." "What's serious matter?" Rainy Thousand Leaves was stunned at first, but immediately understood. Her beautiful face became even redder, and she lowered her head even more. She used a voice that was as soft as a mosquito and said, "Yes." The corner of Nye Tian's mouth slightly raised. He pulled Rui Qinyu and left. The next day, the mottled sunlight shone on the walls of the room. Nye Tian stood up from the bed and turned around to look at the sleeping Rui Qinyu. He could not help but smile happily. Afterwards, Nye Tian did not disturb Rui Qinyu. Instead, he left the room by himself. He had already agreed with Earth Chief that he would set off for Demon Sealing City in a few days. Right now, he had something extremely important to do, which was fusing with the Earth Vein source. Earth Chief had given a great gift to Nye Tian, which was the Earth Vein source. Nye Tian was currently an early overgod. He believed that as long as he fused with the Earth Vein source, his strength would increase to mid-overgod or even late overgod. Chapter 2041. Several days later, in a small courtyard in the city lord's estate of the Shenwu city, Nye Tian walked out of his room and radiated with a sharp aura. His gaze was as sharp as a sword, and he seemed like an unsheathed sword. He had already fused with the source of the earth successfully. His strength had reached mid-overgod, and he was showing signs of breaking through to late overgod. However, that was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that his martial body had become even more powerful after fusing with the source of the earth. At the same time, he possessed an even more insane recovery rate. Nye Tian. Rui Qinyu appeared as soon as Nye Tian walked out of the room. She wore a purple dress with a green sash around her waist, which accentuated her perfect figure. "Qinya, let's go." Nye Tian smiled faintly. His face was filled with happiness. He had already told Rui Qinyu that they would be going to the Demon Sealing City in the God Sealing region. Nye Tian decided to bring Rui Qinyu with him this time. If there was any danger, he could get her to hide in the Nine Extremities. Now, Nye Tian and Rui Qinyu prepared to go to the main hall of the city lord's estate and bid farewell to Gongsun Xingji and the others. Actually, there was one more thing that Nye Tian did not do after becoming the champion of the Evil Edge Sword competition, which was activate the Legend of Shenwu. The Legend of Shenwu was a legacy left behind by the first master of the Shenwu Sword Pagoda. He was a legendary swordsman and was extremely powerful. However, Nye Tian had never been interested in legacies. Even if he could activate the legend of the Divine Marshal, he wouldn't be willing to obtain it. He believed in his own strength, so he did not need anyone's legacy. Very soon, Nye Tian and Rui Qinyu arrived at the main hall of the city lord's estate. At this moment, Gongsun Xingji, Third Lady Gongsun, Fenghua, Qianyu, Gu Quangsha, Jin Jingyan, Gue Wu Kan, and the others were all there. Even Sakura and Lien Wui were there. Nye Tian. Gongsun Xingji hurriedly stood up when he saw Nye Tian arrive. He was extremely polite. A few days ago, Nye Tian had already helped Gongsun Xingji remove the forbidden blood seal from his body. He was now a true legendary swordsman. "Master Divine Sword, you look well. Looks like you've recovered." With a faint smile, Nye Tian examined Gongsun Xingji with his soul awareness and discovered that the forbidden blood seal's aura was completely gone. With a hearty smile, Gongsun Sheng bowed deeply towards Nye Tian. "It's all thanks to you that I was able to regain my new life, Mr. Nye Tian. Please accept a bow from me." No matter what, Gongsun Xingji was of the same generation as Nye Tian, so Nye Tian did not want to accept his bow. "Master Divine Sword, you're exaggerating." Nie Tian hurriedly stepped forward and helped Gongsun Xingji up. At this moment, Gongsun Xingji was someone of the same generation as Nie Dao. Nie Tian did not want to accept his bow. At this moment, Fenghua Qianyu also walked over and said solemnly, "If Mr. needs my help in the future, please let me know. Even if it's a mountain of blades or a sea of flames, I will not refuse." Although third Lady Gongsuan's life was saved by Earth Chief, the latter was only willing to help because of Nie Tian. Therefore, Fenghua Qianyu owed this favor to Nie Tian. "Master Fenghua is too polite." Nie Tian smiled and said, "You don't have to be so polite. Just call me Nie Tian." Third Lady Gongsun smiled and walked forward, looking at Rui Qianyu, and asked, "Nie Tian, this lady is so beautiful. Who is she?" Apart from Gou Guangsha and the others, no one else had seen Rui Qianyu before. They could not help but be curious. When did such an outstanding lady appear by Nie Tian's side? "She's my wife, Rui Qianyu." Nie Tian smiled and turned to look at Rui Qianyu. Rui Qianyu was stunned. Her beautiful eyes suddenly flickered and seemed to be filled with tears. She did not expect that Nie Tian would introduce himself in such a way. Nie Tian smiled gently. In his heart, Mo Rushi was his wife, Rui Qianyu was also his wife, and Cher was also his wife. He felt that he was extremely blessed to be able to obtain the favor of 3 girls at the same time. Following that, everyone sat down. "Nie Tian, do you really want to go to the God Prohibition region alone?" Gui Wu Guangsha looked at Nie Tian and asked with a worried expression. Originally, he wanted to accompany Nie Tian to the God Prohibition region, but Nie Tian was going alone. "Yes." Nie Tian nodded his head. He had already decided that he would walk alone for the rest of the journey. He would not trouble Gui Wu Guangsha anymore. At this time, Nie Tian suddenly thought of something and said, "Master Gui Wu, I have something to trouble you with." "Go ahead." Gui Wu Guangsha replied happily. Nie Tian nodded slightly and said, "I have some friends in the God Prohibition region's subsidiary plane world, Heaven Boundary. I would like to trouble Master Gui Wu to go there and bring them to the territory." Saying that, Nie Tian turned to look at Gongsun Sheng and said, "Master Divine Sword, most of my friends are swordsmen, but they are not strong. I would like to let them join the Divine Martial Sword Pagoda. Is that okay?" "Of course." Gongsun Sheng agreed and said, "Mr. Nie Tian's friends are my friends. Mr. Nie Tian, rest assured, as long as your friends come to the Divine Martial Sword Pagoda, I promise to provide them with the best cultivation resources." "Thank you, Master Divine Sword." Nie Tian nodded his thanks. In fact, he had long wanted to bring his disciples and friends from the God Prohibition region to the territory, but he had never had the chance. Now, he was taking advantage of this opportunity to do it. He believed that his disciples and friends would receive the best treatment in the Divine Martial Sword Pagoda. After doing this, Nie Tian felt like a stone had been lifted from his heart. "Mr. Nie Tian, I have heard about Brother Jian Qingqi. I never thought that Jiang Lai would be so vicious to do such a thing." At that moment, Gongsun Sheng suddenly spoke. His eyes flickered as though he was hesitating about something. Finally, he said, "Mr. Nie Tian, I actually know of an item that can definitely reconstruct Brother Jian Qingqi's physical body." "Really?" Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he almost screamed. Gui Wu Guangsha, Jin Jingyun, and the others were also stunned. Their eyes suddenly became heated. They did not expect Gongsun Xingji to say such a thing. When Gui Wu Guangsha told Gongsun Sheng about Jian Qingqi, the latter did not say such a thing. "Yes." Gongsun Sheng nodded heavily, but his expression was very solemn. He said cautiously, "In the Divine Martial Sword Pavilion, there's a notebook left behind by the first Master Divine Sword. The notebook recorded some of the first Master's secrets. One of the secrets recorded an extremely mystical item. That item is called the Dragon Spring Vein." "Dragon Spring Vein?" Gui Wu Guangsha and the others were shocked when they heard Gongsun Sheng's words. They were confused because they had never heard of the Dragon Spring Vein. Chapter 2042. The Dragon Spring Vein. Nie Tian froze on the spot when he heard these words. He had never expected Gongsun Xingji to mention the Dragon Spring Vein. The Dragon Spring Vein was something that Nie Tian had been searching for. When Nie Tian was still in the 3,000 Small Worlds, he had learned about the Dragon Spring Vein from the Dragon Soul Di Shi and had agreed to help Di Shi find the lost Dragon Spring Vein. However, too many things had happened later. The Demon Abyss, the Dragon Rebel clan, and other forces had shown Nie Tian the great secret behind the Dragon Spring Vein. Now, the Divine Lord of the Dragon Rebel clan, Ni Jianming, and Di Shi were searching for the Dragon Spring Vein. How can Nie Tian not be surprised that Gongsun Xingji had mentioned the Dragon Spring Vein? Nie Tian, what's wrong? Do you know about the Dragon Spring Vein? Gongsun Xingji couldn't help but ask when he saw that Nie Tian was stunned. Only then did Nie Tian come to his senses. His expression flickered slightly as he said in a low voice, I do know about the Dragon Spring Vein. It's a sacred relic of the ancient Dragon Clan. It's said that it's what gave rise to the Divine Dragon Clan. However, the Dragon Spring Vein has been lost for a long time. No one knows where it is. At this point, Nie Tian suddenly looked at Gongsun Xingji and asked in a trembling voice, Lord Divine Swordmaster, according to the records you read, where did the first Lord Divine Swordmaster see the Dragon Spring Vein? The Dragon Spring Vein was the sacred relic of the entire Dragon Clan. Nie Tian had no doubt that the Dragon Spring Vein could reconstruct Jian Qingqi's body. However, where was he going to find the Dragon Spring Vein? In a place called the Demon Abyss of 10,000 degrees. Gongsun Xingji hesitated, but finally said it. Demon Abyss of 10,000 degrees. Upon hearing these words, Nie Tian's expression changed once again. His expression, which had just eased up, once again stiffened, and he stood rooted to the ground like an idiot. Demon Abyss of 10,000 degrees. This was another place that Nie Tian knew. He just learned about it and was about to go there. One coincidence followed by another. Nie Tian's mind was in a mess. The first-generation Divine Swordmaster saw the legendary Dragon Spring Vein in the Myriad Degrees Demon Abyss, and Nie Tian was about to go to the Myriad Degrees Demon Abyss. This kind of coincidence made him feel like he was dreaming. When Gongsun Shengji, Guiwu Guangsha, and the others saw Nie Tian's reaction, they were all stunned. After a long time, they asked in astonishment, Nie Tian, don't tell me you even know about the Myriad Demon Abyss? Nie Tian knew about the Dragon Spring Vein and the Myriad Degrees Demon Abyss. Just who was he? How did he know everything? It had to be said that these were just coincidences. Nie Tian had only learned about the Myriad Devil Abyss not too long ago. Yes, Nie Tian forcefully suppressed the shock in his heart and calmed himself down. He took a deep breath and said, To tell you the truth, I made a deal with Earth Chief. The place I really want to go next is the Myriad Demon Abyss. You want to go to the Myriad Demon Abyss? Gongsun Shengji's expression changed. He suddenly let out a strange cry and said in fear, You can't go. The Myriad Demon Abyss absolutely cannot go. Seeing Gongsun Shengji's reaction, Nie Tian couldn't help but narrow his eyes. He said in astonishment, Lord Divine Swordmaster, why can't I go to the Myriad Demon Abyss? The others also looked at Gongsun Shengji in confusion. The latter's reaction was indeed a bit too much. Gongsun Shengji took a deep breath and said, Nie Tian, you don't know, but I saw in the first-generation Divine Swordmaster's notes that the Myriad Demon Abyss is an extremely dangerous place. It is a place ruled by other races. They hate humans very much, and they kill humans on sight. It is impossible for human martial artists to survive in the Myriad Demon Abyss. Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed, and his expression changed slightly. Actually, Earth Chief had already told him that he would see many extinct races in the Myriad Demon Abyss. However, Earth Chief didn't tell him that the Myriad Demon Abyss was ruled by other races and that humans were not welcome in the Myriad Demon Abyss. At this time, Gongsun Shengji continued, Nie Tian, according to the notes, the martial artists in the Myriad Demon Abyss are extremely powerful and far more ferocious than the martial artists of the 9 regions. Therefore, you absolutely cannot go to the Myriad Demon Abyss. Lord Divine Swordmaster, Don't say any more. Since I have already promised Earth Chief, I will definitely abide by the agreement. No matter how dangerous the myriad demon abyss is, I must go, Nyetian said with a faint smile. He would definitely go to the myriad demon abyss. Moreover, the dragon spring vein had once appeared in the myriad demon abyss. This strengthened his determination to go there even more. Sigh. Gongsun Shengji couldn't help but sigh when he saw Nyetian's firm attitude. He knew that Nyetian wasn't the kind of person who would easily change his mind, so there was no point in saying anything else. Lord Divine Swordmaster, if possible, I would like to borrow the first Lord Divine Swordmaster's notes. Is that okay? Nyetian looked at Gongsun Shengji and suddenly asked. He knew nothing about the myriad demon abyss. It would be great if he could read the notes that Gongsun Shengji mentioned. Gongsun Shengji's expression changed and became very embarrassed. He said, Nyetian, the notes are no longer with me. I asked the guardian elder of Sword Tower. The notes should have been taken by Xian Zongfeng. Eyebrows furrowed, Nyetian growled, Damn it. Xian Zongfeng was too despicable. Not only did he escape, but he also took the notes with him. Nyetian was curious as to why Xian Zongfeng wanted the notes. At this time, Nyetian suddenly looked at Sakura. The latter lowered his head and didn't say anything. He seemed to be thinking about something. Sakura was the first divine sword master of the Shenwu Sword Pagoda, and he was also the junior brother of the first divine sword master. Perhaps he knew something. Lord Divine Sword Master, thank you for the information. Nyetian stood up and was ready to leave. At this time, Sakura suddenly stood up and said, Nyetian, I'll go with you. Nyetian's gaze slightly froze. He couldn't hide the surprise in his eyes. Sakura originally planned to stay in Shenwu City, and Nyetian could only agree. Sakura had already helped him a lot. He couldn't let the former follow him all the time. Now that Sakura suddenly suggested going to the myriad demon abyss with him, Nyetian was very surprised. Little brother Sakura, Lien Wui was stunned. Her eyes turned red and she was about to cry. The reason why Sakura wanted to stay in Shenwu City was because of Lien Wui. Wui, wait for me to come back. Sakura nodded and didn't explain too much to Lien Wui. He raised his head and said to Nyetian, Nyetian, let's go. Nyetian looked at Sakura, then at Lien Wui, and finally nodded. Sakura must have noticed something for him to change his mind at this time. It was just that it wasn't convenient for him to say it now. Nyetian didn't hesitate anymore. He turned around and walked out of the hall. He took out the realm ship and was ready to leave. The realm ship was given to him by Gue Wuchan. It would be very convenient for him to travel between realms in the future,